In 1994, the discovery of 5 lifeless bodies inside a large house in New Zealand became one of the strangest and most expensive criminal cases the country had ever faced. David Bain was the eldest son and the only survivor of the incident. Shockingly, David was later charged with 5 counts of murder, accused of killing his entire family. He was only 22 years old at the time. But if you think that's where the story ends, think again. 19 years later, David walked free, and the reason why is astonishing. It's one of those cases that makes you question everything. Trust me, you'll want to grit your teeth and hang on until the very end. But before we dive into the shocking twists and turns, let's first take a closer look at the Bain family, the people at the heart of this chilling mystery. By all appearances, the Bain family seemed like a typical religious family. David Cullen Bain was born on March 27, 1972, the first child of Robin Bain and Margaret Bain. His parents had married 3 years earlier. In 1969, they were deeply rooted in their faith, hoping for a peaceful, close-knit family life. But life had other plans. When David was 2 years old, Robin felt called to be a missionary teacher, so the family moved far away from home. The Bains uprooted their lives and moved over 3,000 miles northwest to Papua New Guinea. It was a massive change, from the familiar streets of New Zealand to the tropical and often challenging environment of a remote island nation. Their family grew. David became the eldest of 4 siblings, with 2 sisters, Arawa and Laniette, born 3 and 4 years after him. A younger brother, Stephen, arriving 8 years later. In many ways, this should have been a time of joy and growth, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. While Robin threw himself into his missionary work, Margaret's spiritual path began to shift. She became fascinated by New Age spiritualism and the idea of channeling spirits, a stark contrast to the traditional religious values the family was raised with. Margaret became convinced that their family was under threat from dark, satanic forces, and fiercely believed that they needed protection from these evil influences. This obsession caused stress and fear at home, creating a sense of discomfort that intensified as time passed. Additionally, Robin's enthusiasm for his missionary work started to fade after several years. The dream that had brought the family to Papua New Guinea began to lose its luster. By 1988, 14 years after their move, they returned to New Zealand. The family settled into a large house in Anderson's Bay, a quiet suburb on New Zealand's South Island. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but life at home was far from peaceful. In 1991, Robin took a job as the principal of a small rural school. On paper, this sounded promising: a stable job, a chance to rebuild a community. But things were deteriorating rapidly. By 1994, the marriage between Robin and Margaret was hanging by a thread. They argued constantly, daily fights that wore down the family's spirit. Margaret's bitterness toward Robin had deepened so much that she reportedly made chilling comments about wanting to kill him. The tension was strong, and they could feel it both emotionally and in the atmosphere of their home. Visitors described the Bain household as a pigsty. The once grand house had become run down and neglected. Broken windows, peeling paint, and clutter filled every corner. Unpleasant smells lingered in the air, a testament to the family's neglect and disarray. Robin was rarely there to help. During the week, he lived and slept in a caravan near the school, miles away from the chaos at home. On weekends, instead of joining the family inside, he stayed in another caravan parked in the garden. The emotional distance between the family members only grew wider. Worse, dark rumors swirled around Robin. There were whispers and accusations of abuse towards his youngest daughter. And yet, these claims cast a shadow over the family and would later become a key element in the case that shocked the nation. On the other hand, David's relationship with his father was tense and strained. In contrast, he was very close to his mother, Margaret, and they often shared grievances about Robin, united in their frustrations. At 22 years old in 1994, David was trying to find his way. He was a music student with dreams of becoming an opera singer. an ambitious goal that set him apart from the typical path his siblings were on. Whether or not he had the talent for international fame is up for debate, but David's passion for music was real. Now, despite the turmoil at home, all 4 Bain children were involved in school or work. Arawa was training to be a teacher, Stephen was finishing high school, and Laniet held a part-time job. However, David's path was a little more complicated. After struggling to fit in at university, he had dropped out for a time and even relied on unemployment benefits. But he eventually returned to university to study classical music, supporting himself by delivering newspapers in the early mornings, a humble job that required discipline and grit. By 1994, the bond between Robin and Margaret was not just broken, it was shattered beyond repair. Margaret had become really convinced that Robin was possessed by a demon she called Balil. She also referred to her husband as a son of Balil, one of the 4 crowned princes of hell. This wasn't some passing thought or simple fear, it was something she wrote about repeatedly in her diary, describing how she believed her husband was under the control of an evil spirit, that it cast a dark shadow over their home and tore the family apart. Margaret's attempts to rid Robin of this demon often took the form of exorcisms, rituals meant to drive the evil out. Robin's mental health suffered immensely under this strain. Colleagues at his school described him as a man who was depressed, withdrawn, and barely functioning, like a shell of the person he once was. Neglecting his own hygiene and appearing almost robotic, Robin seemed lost, trapped in a life that was falling apart around him. Meanwhile, the children found themselves caught in the middle of this toxic environment. David, Arawa, Laniet, and Stephen each had their own complicated relationships with their parents and with each other. Some children sided more with their mother, others were closer to their father. The house, already cluttered and chaotic, was filled with tension and emotional pain. It was clear that the family was on the brink of collapse. And then, on the morning of Monday, June 20th, 1994, the unimaginable happened. At exactly 7:09 in the morning, David Bain made a frantic call to emergency services. All dead. They're all dead. I can't believe they're all dead. David trying to explain what he had found in his own home. When police arrived, they were confronted with a scene so grim and tragic that it was almost unimaginable. David's mother, sisters, and youngest brother were all dead. His father lay in the lounge, a bullet wound to the head. The family rifle was on the floor beside him, and chillingly, a typed message on the computer read, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserves to stay." The family home was a mess, as usual, but now it was stained with loss and violence. All 5 members of the Bain family were dead, victims of a brutal shooting that shocked the entire nation. The question everyone wanted answered was, who did this and why? In the days following the massacre, more evidence emerged that suggested Robin, the father, might have been innocent after all. Remarkably, the only blood found on him was his own. There was none on his clothes, socks, or shoes which he had been wearing that day. This was puzzling because if Robin had been the killer and had then shot himself, one would expect at least some transfer of blood to his clothing or hands. Moreover, Robin's fingerprints were completely absent from the rifle found beside him, a fact that forensic experts found hard to reconcile. If Robin had fired the fatal shots and then turned the weapon on himself, his fingerprints should have been all over the gun. To complicate matters further, no gunpowder residue was detected on his hands, a forensic detail that contradicted the idea of him taking his own life. The initial theory seemed clear. The father, Robin, had killed his family before taking his own life. But this explanation quickly began to unravel. Forensic experts examined the bullet wound in Robin's head and declared it nearly impossible that he had shot himself. The trajectory and angle of the bullet, along with the blood patterns, suggested his body had been moved after death, casting doubt on the father theory. This twist in the investigation shifted suspicion towards David Bain. If Robin wasn't the killer, then why was David alive when everyone else in his family was dead? Why had he been spared to add to the growing mystery? David's story just didn't quite add up. When officers first questioned him, he explained that he had completed his usual newspaper round between 6 and 6:42 in the morning. This timeline seemed straightforward enough, and a neighbor even confirmed to police that they saw David entering the Bain property at around 6:40 a.m. But here's where things get strange. David didn't call for help until 7:09 a.m., a full 24 minutes after he supposedly returned home. What happened during that gap? When interrogated, David admitted he zoned out, unsure of what to do or how to react to the horror inside his own house. This delay immediately raised red flags for investigators, who wondered if something was being left out of his story. Adding more complexity to the case, David was unable to explain the fresh injuries on his forehead and knees. These wounds suggested some kind of recent struggle or accident, but he had no clear explanation. Even more incriminating was the fact that the gun found next to Robin's body actually belonged to David. He further admitted he was the only person who knew where the key to unlock the gun's safety mechanism was kept, making him the prime suspect in the eyes of the police. With this mounting suspicion, it didn't take long for the authorities to detain David. Merely 4 days after the horrific massacre, he was arrested and charged with the murders of his entire family. Digital forensics played a crucial role in unraveling the tangled timeline of that tragic morning. It was discovered that the computer on which the final letter was typed had been switched on at 6:44 a.m., just 2 minutes after David reportedly arrived home. This suggested that the note had been composed shortly after his return, seemingly placing him at the scene during the time of the killings. Despite all the mounting evidence casting doubt on Robin's guilt, the investigation took a dark turn just 17 days after the murders. The Bain family's relatives, deeply unsettled by the gruesome scene, decided to take drastic action. Relatives, worried about teenagers breaking in and accidentally causing a fire or other problems, asked for the house to be deliberately burned down in a safe, controlled manner. The decision was approved by David himself, who agreed to this controversial move. While it might seem illogical to burn down a crime scene, the family and authorities wanted to prevent further tragedy or vandalism. Within minutes, the old wooden Bain family home was engulfed in roaring flames. The blaze quickly consumed the house, erasing the physical space where such a horrific tragedy had unfolded. The house was consumed by towering flames for more than an hour. The fire could be seen over most of the city. It burned 17 days after Arawa, Laniette, and Stephen were killed, along with parents Robin and Margaret. Still, with the house now reduced to ashes, the investigators could only rely on the evidence they had already gathered. No further forensic work could be done on the physical crime scene, as it no longer existed. How the family managed to get permission to burn down a crime scene so fast, or why anyone even thought it was a good idea, remains a total mystery. Despite all this, the wheels of justice kept turning. Almost 1 year to the day after the massacre, in May of 1995, David's trial finally began. Prosecutors came well prepared and carefully reconstructed a timeline of the horrific morning. According to their version, David woke at 5 a.m. to the familiar buzz of his alarm clock. After dressing, he put on a pair of white opera gloves, a strange and unsettling choice, and retrieved his rifle. Along with the ammunition from his wardrobe, using a spare key, he unlocked the gun's trigger lock, effectively readying himself for what would become a brutal and bloody spree. David systematically shot his mother, then his 2 sisters, and finally his younger brother. During a violent struggle with his brother Stephen, David lost a lens from his glasses and suffered several injuries himself. Blood from the victims soaked into David's clothes, a damning detail prosecutors emphasized to prove his involvement. Trying to cover his tracks, David supposedly threw the bloodied clothes into the washing machine, started a cycle, took a shower, and changed into fresh, clean clothes. These actions explain the pools of blood found scattered throughout the laundry room and bathroom, places no one would expect unless someone was desperately trying to erase evidence. After this cleanup, David reportedly went about his usual morning routine, leaving the house at 5:45 a.m. to deliver newspapers as if nothing was wrong. Upon returning home at approximately 6:42 a.m., he went upstairs and switched on the computer at 6:44 a.m., then typed a message. Then, he waited for his father, Robin, to return. Robin was known to enter the house from his caravan at exactly 7 a.m. every morning to pray, and tragically, that day was no different. Prosecutors argued that David hid behind a curtain in the lounge, silently waiting for Robin to nearby. At that precise moment, he shot his father at point-blank range. Only then did he make the call to emergency services, feigning shock and despair. This call coincided with the 24-minute gap. David claimed he had zoned out, unsure of what to do next. Afterward, David allegedly staged the scene to make it look like Robin had taken his own life. But David tells a completely different story. He told the court that he had gotten up at his usual time, prepared for his paper route, and left the house with his dog. Upon returning around 6:42 a.m., he went straight to his room, took off his shoes, and went downstairs to wash his hands. While he admitted putting his clothes into the washing machine, he denied they had any blood on them. Heading back upstairs, he claimed he noticed bullets and the rifle's trigger lock lying on the floor. Frantically, he searched the house and found his mother, sisters, and brother all dead in their bedrooms. His father was also dead, lying in the lounge. According to David, he then zoned out for about 20 minutes before finally calling emergency services. Additionally, David's defense team proposed a shocking alternative, that Robin, the father, was actually the killer. According to their theory, Robin had killed his family before turning on the computer to type a message and then had taken his own life. It was a bold claim, but several parts of David's story just didn't add up. The prosecution, meanwhile, argued that David's motive was financial. They claimed he wanted to inherit the family fortune. His parents had put away a large sum of money intended for a new house. When the trial ended, David Bain was found guilty on all 5 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 16 years. Now, you might think the story ends there. A horrific family massacre, an obvious suspect, and a clear sentence. Case closed, but you'd be wrong. Over the months and years that followed, David Bain's case captivated many. News of the Bain family massacre spread like wildfire across the nation, and public opinion was sharply divided on who was truly to blame. One of David's most vocal supporters was Joe Karam, a former All-Black rugby star. After retiring from professional sports, Joe developed a deep interest in the case during his more relaxed years. Convinced of David's innocence, Joe became an outspoken advocate. Following David's sentencing, Joe visited him over 200 times in prison. He even wrote 4 books about the case, tirelessly researching and pressuring the justice system for a review. His efforts eventually led to a major breakthrough, an appeal to the Privy Council. This appeal, which began in May 2007, 12 years after David's initial imprisonment, was a monumental moment. The Privy Council, based in London, found that a serious miscarriage of justice had occurred. They ordered David's convictions to be quashed and scheduled a new trial. The council argued there was significant doubt David would have been convicted if crucial evidence, discovered after the original trial, had been presented to the jury. Much of this new evidence was information the jury had never even heard. For example, Dean Cottle, a friend of Laniet, revealed something explosive. According to Dean, Laniet had confided in him about an incestuous relationship with her father, Robin. Just days before the massacre, she had traveled home to confront the family with this horrific secret. This testimony suggested a possible motive for Robin, but the judge, in the original trial, ruled Dean's evidence as hearsay and labeled him an unreliable witness. As a result, this crucial information was suppressed and never reached the jury. As time passed, even more disturbing facts came to light. Robin had reportedly published brutal and sadistic stories written by his pupils in a school newsletter. One of these stories even involved A Fictional Family Massacre. A 46-page document detailed the many wrongdoings of the first trial, painting a clear picture of its inherent unfairness. None of this information was available to the jury in 1995, meaning David's defense team couldn't properly shift suspicion towards Robin. Consequently, David was granted bail and allowed to remain out of prison while awaiting the new trial. This brief taste of freedom, after spending over a decade behind bars, must have felt almost surreal. For 3 months, he lived with Joe Karam and then moved to Auckland. This fleeting liberty was likely a bittersweet experience, shadowed by the heavy knowledge that his nightmare was far from over. 2 years later, in March 2009, David's retrial commenced, forcing him and everyone connected to the case to relive the horrors once again. David pleaded not guilty to the 5 murder charges. Again, his defense argued that Robin, the father, was the true killer who had then turned the gun on himself. This time, however, the defense brought forward far more compelling evidence, suggesting why Robin might have committed such a chilling act. They detailed Robin's descent into a deep and morbid depression, his alarming behavior that concerned colleagues and friends, and most importantly, they uncovered the secret at the heart of it all, Laniette's dark and hidden truth, which she was allegedly ready to reveal to the family just before the massacre. This secret, steeped in horror and despair, painted a picture of a man pushed to the edge by desperation and shame. The retrial dragged on for 3 grueling months, filled with testimony, arguments, and re-examinations of every detail. Yet, despite the lengthy process, the jury's decision was astonishingly swift. Less than a day after deliberation, they returned with a unanimous verdict of not guilty. After spending 13 years in prison and 2 additional years under legal suspicion, David Bain was finally free. Since then, he has lived outside the prison walls, rebuilding his life piece by piece. However, the case continues to divide opinions sharply. There are still many details that make it hard for some to accept David's innocence. His bloody fingerprints were found on the murder weapon. Fresh injuries appeared on his body with no explanation, and Stephen's blood was discovered on clothes David had washed and denied having stained. What about the mysterious 20 minutes David claimed to have zoned out for? How does one explain that lapse during such a horrific day? More tellingly, experts have widely agreed that the angle of Robin's fatal wound made it almost impossible for him to have taken his own life. So, if Robin didn't kill himself, then who was responsible? Adding to the suspicion is the fact that David gave permission to burn down the family home, the very scene of the murders. To many, that act alone speaks volumes. Even David's girlfriend at the time said he had a premonition something terrible was about to happen shortly before the killings, which seems too coincidental to ignore. Yet, on the flip side, there are equally convincing reasons to believe Robin might have been the true culprit. Robin was reportedly deeply unhappy with his life, and if Laniette's secret was true, he could have been overwhelmed with panic and fear. Shell casings were found in his caravan, and the disturbing, sadistic stories revealed by his colleagues painted the portrait of a man unraveling mentally and emotionally. This case remains one of New Zealand's most polarizing, sparking intense debate over who truly committed the murders. The financial cost of this case was staggering. Taxpayers shelled out over $7 million, with the retrial alone costing more than $4 million, making it the most expensive trial in New Zealand's history. Joe Karam, David's unwavering advocate, lost over $500,000 personally supporting the cause. David himself sought compensation for his wrongful imprisonment. Given the high-profile nature of the case, New Zealand's Justice Minister brought in overseas judges to review the application. The review recommended compensation, but bureaucratic delays meant that the case was handed back and forth between ministers. 6 long years of red tape and delays passed before David was finally awarded $925,000 in 2016. During all this turmoil, David rebuilt his life. He found work as an engineer, fell in love, married, had a child, and legally changed his name. Rumor has it that the family eventually moved to Australia, perhaps to escape the long shadow cast by the case. As for the Bain family home, no trace remains of the original property that was burned down in 1994. The site has since been completely transformed into a landscaped, modern 3-bedroom house, erasing the physical memory of what happened there. Over the decades, the story of the Bain family massacre and all its related evidence has faded into the distant past, becoming almost like a dark legend whispered about but rarely confronted.
Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Daniel LaPlante. In 1986, Frank Bowen, with his 2 daughters, Tina Bowen and Karen Bowen, experienced a series of terrifying events at their home in Townsend, Massachusetts. The girls initially believed that the house was haunted when strange phenomena began to occur, such as furniture being shuffled, strange noises coming from the walls, and threatening words written on mirrors and walls in a red material that looked like blood. These events left the family in extreme fear. Frank Bowen initially thought that his daughters were imagining things or playing a prank, but all doubts disappeared when he was faced with the terrifying truth. The person behind these bizarre events was Daniel LaPlante, a 16-year-old boy who lived nearby. In addition to trying to scare the Bowen family, Daniel secretly lived in their house for about 2 months. Taking refuge in the walls and narrow spaces between rooms, Daniel used secret passageways in the house to spy on and manipulate the family. The truth was discovered when Mr. Frank found Daniel in the house, confronting him with a weapon in his hand. Police later determined that Daniel had cut holes in the walls to move around undetected, turning the Frank home into a hiding place. Daniel LaPlante, often referred to as Danny, was born on May 15, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. He grew up with his parents and 2 brothers. But his childhood was far from happy. Daniel endured various forms of abuse from his father, including physical, emotional, and abuse. After cutting ties with his father, Daniel began living with another man, who also treated him cruelly. Their home was an unhealthy environment, filthy and cluttered with garbage, with a yard full of trash and stray animals roaming freely. This atmosphere contributed to Daniel's growing disillusionment with life. He became rebellious, and his teachers frequently complained about his behavior. What began as troubling behavior eventually escalated into self-destructive tendencies. Daniel struggled socially, performed poorly in school, and was described by his classmates as strange, unhygienic, and unpleasant. Most avoided him because of his appearance and behavior, concerned by his actions. The school referred Daniel to a psychiatrist for help during their sessions. It was discovered that Daniel had dyslexia and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. While the psychiatrist initially appeared to want to help, he instead exploited Daniel's vulnerabilities. Over the course of a year, the psychiatrist coerced Daniel into an abuse relationship, further compounding the trauma he had already endured throughout his life. By 1986, as a teenager, desperate to escape his life of torment, Abuse began committing petty thefts in his neighbors' homes. Initially, he focused on stealing specific items, but over time, he shifted his focus to instilling fear in the residents. He started leaving cryptic, unsettling messages, rearranging household items to confuse the homeowners, and scattering crumbs and food stains throughout the houses. One of the homes he targeted belonged to the Bowen family. The Bowen family lived in Townsend, Massachusetts. In the same county as Daniel, the household consisted of Frank and his 2 daughters. The girls' mother had recently passed away from cancer, leaving the family grief-stricken and struggling to adjust to their drastically changed lives. When Daniel broke into their home, he noticed the family portraits, which radiated a sense of closeness and warmth. This enraged Daniel, who felt deeply unhappy with his own life. To him, such a family seemed like an impossible dream. It was then that he devised a sinister plan. Toward the end of 1986, One evening, Tina Bowen received an anonymous call from a young man who introduced himself as Daniel LaPlante. When Tina asked how he had gotten her phone number, Daniel claimed he attended the same school as her and had obtained it through a mutual friend. Curious, Tina asked if they had met before, and Daniel provided a false description of himself to spark her interest. He claimed to have bright blonde hair, an athletic build, and said he lived in her neighborhood. During their conversations, which continued for about a week, Daniel was very polite and charming, successfully gaining Tina's trust. After much persuasion, Daniel convinced Tina to go on a date with him. He offered to pick her up from her home, and his imagined charm seemed to win her over. However, when the big evening arrived, Daniel made no effort to clean up his appearance when he showed up at the Bowen house and rang the doorbell. Tina immediately realized that everything he had claimed on the phone was untrue. As she opened the door, she saw that Daniel looked nothing like his description. His clothes were dirty, his physique was far from athletic, and his hair was dark instead of blonde. Despite her disappointment, Tina felt there might still be some trace of the charming man she had spoken with beneath it all. So, she decided to give him a chance. While they were walking together, Tina shared with Daniel that her mother had recently passed away from cancer. Instead of offering comfort, Daniel began asking her unsettling questions about her mother's appearance after death, what it was like to witness death up close, and the extent of her mother's suffering before she passed. The conversation was so unusual and inappropriate that it felt nothing like the casual evening chats Tina was used to. An hour into the date, Tina didn't leave, though she found the entire experience deeply strange and upsetting. She had never encountered someone so fixated on her mother's death, and Daniel's blunt, insensitive questions showed no regard for the pain she and her family had endured. This left she feeling profoundly sad. Tina later expressed her sadness to her younger sister, saying how much she missed their mother and how desperately she wished to speak with her again. One evening, while home alone, Tina and her sister decided to try contacting their mother's spirit using a Ouija board. They went down to the basement and, with little expectation that it would work, began the ritual. However, their efforts were unsuccessful when they heard their father returning from work. The sisters quickly hid the Ouija board and went back to their room. Later that night, just after midnight, Tina and Karen were startled awake by a series of knocks on their bedroom wall. Excited, the sisters believed it was their mother attempting to communicate with them. They felt their spiritualism session had not been in vain. When they asked directly if it was truly their mother, a loud knock sounded on the wall, which the girls took as a definite yes. For several nights, strange events continued to occur, but only Tina and Karen were aware of them. However, when they tried to show their father the supernatural activity, nothing happened. It all began with faint knocks on the walls, but soon objects started disappearing. Items left on the table were found scattered on the floor the next day. The girls noticed furniture moving on its own, and food and drinks vanishing mysteriously. These occurrences unsettled them, and they began doubting that it was their mother trying to communicate. After all, their mom wouldn't frighten them like this. When the girls explained everything to Frank, he dismissed their claims. He believed the so-called supernatural events were just the girls acting out. Frank assumed Tina and Karen were seeking attention and tried to remain patient, convinced they would eventually overcome their pain. However, as time went on, Tina and Karen became increasingly terrified of their own home. The knocks on the walls and other strange happenings were driving them to the brink. Still, Frank refused to believe Tina and Karen. In desperation, Tina decided to confront the spirit directly. Now, she's certain it wasn't their late mother. Tina grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, along with Karen, went down to the basement. On one of the walls, they found a message written in red letters, which they immediately assumed was blood. The message read, "I am in your room. Find me." Terrified, Tina and Karen ran to the neighbor's house, desperate to escape the torment they believed was caused by the spirit they had summoned. Tina and Karen anxiously waited for their father to return home from work. When Frank arrived, he immediately noticed the chaos upon seeing the message on the basement wall. He quickly realized it was written in tomato sauce. Furious, he lashed out at his daughters, scolding them for going too far and damaging their own home. He told them they needed a healthier way to deal with their pain, and even threatened to send Tina and Karen to a psychotherapist after this unsettling incident. Everything seemed to go back to normal. The supernatural events stopped, and the family began to relax. Life resumed its usual peaceful rhythm. The girls behaved calmly, and Frank continued his work as if nothing had happened. However, one day, a knock on the wall signaled the ghost's return. Tina and Karen, consumed by fear, returned to the basement, where all their troubles had begun. Suddenly, they heard another loud knock from upstairs. Panicked, they ran to Tina's bedroom, only to find a chilling message written in large red letters on the wall. "I'm back. Find me if you can." Tina grabbed her sister's hand, and they fled the house, seeking help from their neighbor, alarmed by the sister's story and their state. The neighbor promptly called Frank to inform him of what was happening. When Frank heard that his daughters were involved in another disturbing incident, he rushed home to address the situation. Convinced his daughters' actions were escalating, he decided to get to the bottom of it. Upon arriving at the neighbor's house, Frank questioned Tina and Karen about the events, shaking with fear. They said everything, including the unsettling message they had discovered, determined to put an end to their fears. Frank decided to go back to the house alone to investigate. As he stepped inside, Frank was met with chaos. The entire house was in disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor. He immediately realized this mess was far beyond what his daughters could have caused. When he entered Tina's bedroom, he found the same disturbing message the girls had described earlier, and now an additional chilling note was scrawled beneath it. "Marry me, confused and uneasy." Frank felt something was terribly wrong. A shiver ran down his spine as he sensed a presence behind him. Turning around, his heart sank. In the corner of the room stood a young man. The man was dressed in Frank's late wife's wedding dress and a blonde wig, even more horrifying. He was holding an axe, though shaken to his core. Frank quickly realized one thing. This was no ghost. Frank chased the intruder until this man fled and disappeared from sight immediately afterward. He called the police. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a hidden space behind a closet in one of the rooms. Inside the wall, they found a small door leading to an underground cavity or passageway between the house's walls, large enough for someone to move through. When a police officer entered the hidden area, they found Daniel curled up in a ball in one corner. Daniel was arrested, with Frank identifies him as the man in the wedding dress who threatened Frank with an axe. Later, authorities uncovered more troubling details about the incident. Tina confided in her father about an unsettling date she had gone on with Daniel a few months earlier. Investigators determined that Daniel had used the hidden passageways to torment Tina and Karen inside the space. Police found a sleeping bag, clothing belonging to the family, and leftover food. The most disturbing discovery, however, was that the secret space connected to every room in the house. This allowed Daniel to move through the walls undetected, spy on the family, and communicate with the girls through the distinct knocking sounds that had terrified them at the time of his arrest. 16-year-old Daniel was sent to a juvenile facility when he turned 17. Court documents were filed to begin trying his case as an adult. He faced multiple charges, including robbery, burglary, and property damage. In October 1987, Daniel was released on bail after his mother paid nearly $10 for his release. After returning to his mother and stepfather's home, Daniel was instructed to stay out of trouble and await his court date on December 11, 1987. However, he ignored these instructions and resumed burglarizing nearby homes. During one of these break-ins, he found a weapon, which he took with him. In November, his stepfather discovered the weapon hidden in a laundry basket. When confronted, Daniel lied and refused to reveal where he had obtained the weapon, although his stepfather confiscated it. It was unclear whether Daniel had access to another one on December 1, 1987. Daniel walked approximately 2 kilometers to reach the large, comfortable mansion of the Gustafson family. The family consisted of 33-year-old Priscilla, her husband Andrew, their 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, and Priscilla is pregnant with their 3rd child. The Gustafson family were a close-knit family dedicated to helping others. Andrew worked as a lawyer and was often away from home, while Priscilla worked at a kindergarten, sang in a choir, and actively participated in their church. On that tragic day, when Daniel broke into their home, only Priscilla and William were there. At this time, Abigail was still at school. He overpowered Priscilla, dragged her into the bedroom, and assaulted her. Afterwards, he suffocated her with a pillow to muffle the sound, and then attacked her twice in the head. Once Priscilla was dead, Daniel turned his attention to William. He carried the boy to a filled bathtub on the 2nd floor and drowned him. Shortly after Abigail arrived home from school, Daniel immediately grabbed Abigail, took her to the bathtub on the 1st floor, and drowned her in it. Just like William, when Andrew arrived at the house around 6 p.m., he immediately sensed something was wrong. The children were not playing as they usually did, and his wife did not come to greet him in the hallway when he called out for Priscilla. There was no response. Concerned, Andrew went to the bedroom, where he discovered a horrifying scene. Priscilla was lying lifeless in an unnatural position, with bloodstains all around. In shock, Andrew called the police right away. He could not even search the house to find the children when the investigators arrived. They found Andrew in such a state of shock that he was unable to think clearly during their search of the house. The police discovered the bodies of the children. Among the evidence collected were 2 spent cartridges from a weapon, strands of the attacker's hair on the bed and on Priscilla's body, an open beer can, and shoe prints near the entrance. Suspicion quickly fell on Daniel, a recently paroled young man who lived near the Gustafson home. He was known for his skill in breaking into nearby houses, which made him a prime suspect. While investigators were searching for him, Daniel was at the city library when questioned about his whereabouts on December 1. He claimed he had been at a family birthday party. He denied any involvement in the case of the Gustafson family and expressed sorrow over what had occurred. The police initially appeared to believe his story, but later, they visited Daniel's home with additional questions and a search warrant. When Daniel was sitting on the porch, spotted the police car. He immediately realized they were there for him, so he fled and hid in the woods. Daniel's actions confirmed the investigators' suspicions were right, and them to search Daniel's house inside. They discovered several shoe soles that matched the footprints found near the Gustafson home. They also found fibers that appeared to be connected to the crime. A sock with saliva stains likely used to gag Priscilla, a .22 caliber shell casing similar to one found at the crime scene, and a cordless phone stolen from the Gustafson home. Additionally, the Daniel family's car was examined. They revealing weapon in the glove compartment. Police quickly called for reinforcements to search for Daniel, the main suspect in the case of the Gustafson family. Over 50 officers participated in the search, aided by helicopters and sniffer dogs that thoroughly combed the forest. A crucial tip came from an emergency call. The caller revealed that Daniel had threatened her with a gun and forced her to drive him away in her truck. Thankfully, she managed to escape. This information helped investigators identify the model of the car Daniel used to flee on the run. He committed several additional robberies, leaving witnesses at the scenes who later reported him to the police. Daniel LaPlante was arrested on December 3, 1987, at 6:03 p.m. while trying to hide behind a garbage can in Ayers Town. At the time of his arrest, he was armed and had committed several crimes while evading capture. Daniel's trial began in October 1988, when he was 18 years old. Although most of his crimes occurred when he was a minor, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Daniel pleaded not guilty. Despite strong evidence against him, Daniel's defense claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but a psychiatric evaluation determined that he could understand right from wrong and was fit for trial. The jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty of murdering the Gustafson family and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole in 1993. Daniel attempted to appeal his sentence, arguing that the search warrant for his home was issued improperly, but he was unsuccessful. In 2000, Daniel requested a transfer to another prison due to safety concerns after receiving threats from fellow inmates, and this request was approved. Then, in 2013, Daniel expressed dissatisfaction with not being allowed to practice his religion freely because his rituals would have required ingredients like blood and banned substance. In 2017, Daniel submitted a petition seeking a reduced sentence, claiming he was under 18 when he committed the crimes, so he should not be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He aimed to serve just 1 life sentence instead of 3 consecutive ones. However, his request was denied because he was required to serve time for each life he had ruined. His statement to the judge was as follows: "I cannot adequately express the weight of my actions. I have taken the lives of 3 innocent people because of my choices. A 5-year-old boy will never celebrate his 6th birthday, and 7-year-old girls will never turn 8. Their mother will not have a 3rd child, and I have robbed an unborn baby of its first breath. This woman may never hear the words, 'I love you' again to my family. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. My remorse is profound and heartfelt." In 2019, Daniel LaPlante applied for parole again, but the authorities was decided that his request would not be reviewed until 2032. Many believe that Daniel lacks the capacity for remorse or any genuine feelings, and they see him as someone who is capable of psychological torment and brutal killings. This raises concerns that if he is released, he may seek out new victims. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case, the case of Saga Elneborg. Saga Elneborg was a 20-year-old girl who was 7 months pregnant at the time. She was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Mohammedaman Dirisek Ibrahim, the father of her child. They had been together for about 2 years and were expecting a baby boy. With doctors confirming that the pregnancy was progressing well, Saga was eagerly looking forward to becoming a mother in just a few weeks and had carefully prepared for the birth of her child during this time. She shared pictures of her growing belly and many items she had bought for her future child on social media. She was especially fond of posting pictures of children's clothes. On April 28, 2023, Saga had scheduled a meeting with her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin, to discuss their relationship. That day, she informed her mother that Mohammed Amin was planning to visit her home, so Melissa decided not to interrupt their conversation. Saga's family was very cautious about her relationship with someone from a different culture, especially since they knew that challenges could arise when meeting Mohammed Amin's family from Somalia. At that time, Mohammed Amin was standing outside Saga's apartment door when he entered the house. Saga began to share some of the problems they were having in their relationship. Saga still loved Mohammed Amin and wanted their relationship to succeed. However, she felt uncomfortable when he often hid her from his parents, which caused conflicts between them. On April 29, 2023, at around 1 p.m., Saga's mother, Melissa, came to her daughter's apartment to support her and help gather her belongings in preparation for the arrival of her grandson. When Melissa arrived at the apartment, she was talking on the phone with her other daughter. She rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered, which surprised her. She knocked on the door, used the intercom, and even called Saga's phone and sent a text message. What puzzled she was that there was still no response from Saga. She thought that her daughter might have forgotten about her visit and gone out to run an errand. although Melissa had a spare key. She noticed that the door was unlocked as she approached, which seemed very suspicious. Saga was always careful to lock the door. Even when she stepped out for a moment to get the mail or do the laundry, there was no way she would leave the door open. When she entered the apartment, Melissa heard the sound of running water in the kitchen. So she rushed in to turn it off. She called out to her daughter, but there was no answer. When Melissa entered her daughter's bedroom, she found the lights off, and the darkness made her feel uneasy. When Melissa turned on the light, she was horrified to see her daughter lying on the floor. Saga was there. With a light cord wrapped around her neck, the scene was even more terrifying because a heavy table had fallen over. Melissa rushed to her daughter's side, pushed the table aside, and carefully removed the cord from her neck. She then called emergency services while attempting to give her daughter first aid. The first thing she noticed was that Saga's body was stiff and very cold, indicating that she had been dead for a considerable amount of time. Paramedics arrived quickly, but unfortunately, both Saga and her unborn child were dead. The police who arrived began an investigation and noted that she had suffered head and facial injuries. The crime scene was covered in dried blood, and jewelry boxes were found upside down on the floor. There were no signs of forced entry, but the police initially considered that she had taken her own life. However, after reviewing data from Saga's cell phone, they concluded that she could not have ended her life by herself. Saga had no mental health problems. She was cheerful and lively. Especially during her pregnancy, she was eagerly awaiting the birth of her child and could never have harmed herself or her baby. Forensic experts collected a significant amount of evidence at the crime scene, including fingerprints, blood, and DNA from under Saga's fingernails and from her belongings for analysis. The forensic expert concluded that Saga died of strangulation, with an estimated time of death between 1 and 3 in the morning. On the forensic expert's desk were not only Saga's body, but also the body of her newborn baby. Weighing 1.7 kg, tests showed that the baby was completely healthy. This was a devastating shock to Saga's mother, family, and friends. The police quickly launched an investigation into the messages from Saga's relatives. The first person they spoke to was her mother, Melissa. She explained that on April 28, her daughter had planned to meet some friends at a local restaurant. Melissa noticed that her daughter seemed very anxious and was checking her phone frequently. Saga said that she did not want to miss a message from her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin. Melissa revealed that he had already informed his parents about Saga. However, before that, Mohammed Amin had been extremely anxious and nearly had a nervous breakdown because he feared that his parents would not approve of his relationship with Saga. His parents are Muslims with strict conservative beliefs. In contrast, Saga is a Swedish citizen with Thai and European heritage, and she holds more modern views. Mohammed Amin and his family are refugees. His parents brought him to Europe when he was a child. Although he grew up in Europe and embraced modernity, he still valued his family's traditions. Another important issue was the difference in religion. Mohammed Amin's family was Muslim, while Saga's relatives were Christian. This difference in beliefs and traditions often led to conflict, straining their relationship. After dining at the restaurant, Saga said goodbye to her mother and friends, who wished her well, not knowing that it would be the last time they would see her alive. Tragically, after returning home, Saga was murdered. Police suspect that Mohammed Amin may have informed his family about his relationship with Saga, which may have provoked their violent reaction and ultimately led to the tragedy. During the initial stages of the investigation, the police looked into whether Mohammed Amin's relatives were involved in the murder. His mother had raised suspicions when she left home late at night. However, it was later confirmed that she had only gone to the shop and returned after about 15 minutes. There was no evidence that his relatives were involved in the case. The The police also discovered that one day, Mohammed Amin's mother found the car he was using parked near Saga's house. At that time, his mother suspected he was having a romantic relationship with a Christian woman. After discovering this, Mohammed Amin's mother was furious. She informed him that he was no longer welcome in their home. She felt that if he did not respect their traditions, it would be easier to cut ties with him. In his defense, Mohammed Amin claimed that he had never visited those people and that he had convinced her of that. However, according to Melissa, their relationship had deteriorated since Saga became pregnant. It was rumored that Mohammed Amin wanted her to have an abortion because he was afraid of his family's reaction. Despite this pressure, Saga decided to continue with the pregnancy and give birth. She said that if necessary, she could raise the child herself. In October, Saga shared the news of her pregnancy with her family, and everyone was very happy at that time. Her relationship with her boyfriend was not good, as they often had conflicts due to cultural differences, which made communication difficult. Saga felt that if Mohammed Amin did not change his views, it would be difficult for them to connect. However, a few months later, things seemed to improve. He began to adapt to her lifestyle and accepted the pregnancy. Appearing happy to be a father, Saga then moved into a larger apartment with a nursery, which she began to decorate. By March 2023, they were still together, but there were some troubling signs in their relationship. A friend confided in Saga that Mohammed Amin had tried to convince her that she needed to kick Saga in the stomach multiple times to induce a miscarriage. Saga was furious when she learned about this, but Mohammed Amin insisted that it was all a fabrication. Melissa knew about these disturbing events, but did not want to accept them as true. However, now that her daughter was dead, it was clear that Mohammed Amin's intention to harm Saga was real. The police began to piece together a timeline of events and soon discovered that Mohammed Amin and Saga had planned to spend that evening together. However, he seemed to be avoiding Saga, intentionally staying late at work to avoid seeing her that evening. Saga spoke to him. She told Mohammed Amin that he needed to tell his family about their relationship, the move, and her pregnancy, or they would break up. On April 28, Saga was waiting to hear from him, according to Melissa. Her daughter seemed quite anxious during this time. The police reviewed cell phone records and confirmed that Saga had been in contact with Mohammed Amin until 11 p.m. on April 28. He had said that he would not inform his parents about Saga and their relationship, stating that his family was more important than having an illegitimate child. Saga felt disappointed with his decision and tried to convince him to reconsider. She argued that if they broke up, his family would eventually find out about the child because she had planned to seek financial support from him after discussing their situation. Mohammed Amin agreed to tell his family about Saga and the baby. He expressed his anxiety, saying that he felt like his heart was going to burst. This was the last message he sent her before she was killed. Police believe that Saga's determination to reveal the truth and her ability to tell his parents herself motivated Mohammed Amin to attack the girl. He remains the only suspect in the case. Mohammed Amin was brought in for questioning. He claimed he had nothing to do with the incident and stated that on the night of the murder, he had returned home to confess to his parents about his relationship with Saga. However, geolocation data showed that this was not true. Mohammed Amin had, in fact, gone to his girlfriend's apartment when told that he was the prime suspect in Saga's murder. Mohammed Amin became defensive. He insisted he was innocent and had an alibi, claiming that he was driving with a friend at the time of Saga's murder. However, the friend was on the phone with someone else and refused to testify, despite his alibi failing. Mohammed Amin maintained that he last saw Saga on the evening of April 27. Mohammed Amin stated that he had confessed their relationship to his parents. However, the police discovered that he had never spent a full night at her new apartment, as he was afraid his family would find out due to Mohammed Amin's suspicious behavior. The police decided to arrest him and keep him in custody while they continued their investigation. He was detained for several months. Eventually, the prosecution gathered strong evidence against him, claiming it was sufficient to ensure victory in court. The investigation even involved specially trained dogs, which helped identify some of the evidence. Mohammed Amin's lawyer argued that the dogs' findings should not be the main basis of the case, as they were not a reliable source of information. However, there was still much more evidence against him. DNA analysis and a review of the evidence took quite a while, but eventually confirmed the truth of the case. Mohammed Amin wrapped an electric cord around Saga's neck while she was sleeping on the sofa. He then dragged Saga to the floor and attempted to push her onto her stomach in an effort to force her to terminate the pregnancy. Despite her best efforts to protect her child, Saga sustained injuries to her hip. Mohammed Amin then attempted to strangle Saga, pressing the edge of the table against her throat. Exhausted and unable to lift the heavy object, Saga suffocated. When she died, the table was still pressed against her throat, leaving a deep dent after committing the crime. Mohammed Amin tried to make it look like a robbery by throwing some boxes around. The defense argued that Saga was the victim of real robbers who stole money and various household items. However, the prosecutor believed that Mohammed Amin's actions only added to his guilt. Several missing items were later discovered during a search of his home. He claimed that these items were either his or gifts from his girlfriend. A key piece of evidence against him was his DNA found under Saga's fingernails. In addition, a forensic expert determined that Saga had been abused before her death. Mohammed Amin claimed that the act was consensual and had occurred a few days before her death. However, the prosecution cast doubt on his testimony, highlighting inconsistencies and lies in his statements during interrogation. Police found multiple traces of his DNA in Saga's apartment. The investigation revealed some disturbing searches by Mohammed Amin. Notably, he searched whether kicking a mother in the stomach could harm her unborn child. The prosecutor's office believes that instead of visiting his family, Mohammed Amin went to Saga's apartment. He never intended to tell his family about her for fear of their reaction, but Saga pressured him with her demands. In response, he killed her. Motivated by fear of his parents, the defense argued that the DNA found under Saga's fingernails could have been there long before the murder. However, Melissa, Saga's mother, insisted that her daughter was very clean and had showered shortly before her death. She knew this, especially during Saga's pregnancy. As her daughter was meticulous about her personal hygiene, it is clear that Saga had showered and changed into clean clothes, meaning that the DNA evidence found on her body and belongings was still fresh and must have been left behind during the attack. Curiously, after Saga's death, Mohammed Amin quickly deleted her from Snapchat and removed his social media accounts. The police found that he was trying to hide his connection to the crime. Fortunately, the deleted data was easily recovered and added to the evidence against him. Although there was no direct evidence, Mohammed Amin's behavior clearly showed that he was indifferent to his girlfriend, Saga. During the investigation, it was noted that he was a short distance from her apartment while continuing to communicate with her from afar. He neither approached nor left, as if he were waiting for something. It is possible that during this time, he was trying to muster the courage to attack or wanted to ensure that Saga was asleep. At 2 a.m., Mohammed Amin's cell phone signal went off. He then turned on his phone to try to contact his friend, but his call was ignored. An active call signal from him was detected in the same residential area where Saga lived. This evidence helped the police uncover another lie by Mohammed Amin. He claimed that during this time, he was at home with his parents. However, Mohammed Amin's cell phone only became active at 2:16 a.m., which matched the forensic expert's conclusion About the time of death of Saga and her child, Mohammed Amin's story kept changing. At one point, he fabricated a story about a gang of robbers. He claimed to have hidden a bag of money in Saga's home, but he never explained where he obtained the large sum. According to Mohammed Amin, the robbers broke into Saga's home to steal the cash. Saga tried to stop the robbers, which ultimately led to her murder. The prosecutor's office rejected this idea. As there were no signs of forced entry at the crime scene, it was clear that Saga had either let the killer into her home willingly or that he had a key to her apartment. Mohammed Amin had a motive for the crime. During his 9 months in prison, he never confessed and steadfastly denied any involvement. However, the prosecutor's office gathered a significant amount of evidence, both direct and indirect, to support their case. Although he did not admit to the crime, he expressed fear about telling his family about Saga. He claimed to love her and even the child, but he believed his conservative parents would disown him for dating a European girl. After hearing arguments from both the prosecution and the defense, the jury deliberated on the verdict. On June 9, 2024, they unanimously found Mohammed Amin Abdirisek Ibrahim guilty of the premeditated murder of Saga Elneborg, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Despite this, he maintained that he loved both Saga and his unborn child. Claiming that he never intended to harm them, he insisted that violence was not part of his character and that this was the first crime he had ever committed. The investigation revealed that Mohammed Amin had been seeing other women regularly during the 2 years of his relationship with Saga. Although he denied any extramarital affairs, evidence showed that he had numerous meetings with different girls, some of which became intimate. This information further tarnished his reputation. His defense attorney, meanwhile, argued that Mohammed Amin was innocent and that Saga had been the victim of an attempted robbery. The attorney promised to fight for his freedom and intended to appeal the jury's decision. An appeal was filed shortly after the decision was announced, but the final outcome remains unclear. Although Mohammed Amin was charged with Saga's murder, he was never charged in connection with the death of his unborn child, which angered Saga's family. The investigation attracted considerable public and media attention. The tragedy once again highlighted issues surrounding migrants, especially those from Muslim countries, who have been arriving in Sweden more frequently in recent years. Many people have noted that these migrants struggle to integrate into European society and often refuse to accept individuals from different cultures. A violent murder arising from cultural and religious differences sparked public outrage and prompted calls for government action. Some defended Mohammed Amin, claiming he was innocent. His family argued that he had no violent tendencies, and many believed in his innocence, offering him strong support. According to relatives, Mohammed Amin was not ready to be a father, but he maintained that he loved his girlfriend and son, even after their tragic deaths. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Stephanie Fernandez. In 2009, Stephanie Fernandez was living in Massachusetts with her 6-year-old daughter, Angelina. Stephanie, a single mother, was struggling financially and had no money to support them. She had learned to dance while she was in school and was quite flexible to make ends meet. Stephanie decided to earn money by dancing in nightclubs and performing for men. She kept her work a secret from Angelina, who only knew that her mother worked nights. One night at work, Stephanie noticed a handsome man staring at her after her performance. She approached him, and they talked for an hour. His name was Andrew Wagner. During their first conversation, they seemed to get along well and discovered they had a lot in common. Stephanie gave him her phone number, and they arranged to meet after her shift, where they both admitted their feelings for each other at the time. Andrew worked at a tire shop, but he aspired to be a police officer and was looking for an opportunity in that field. Stephanie and Andrew's relationship progressed quickly. She introduced Andrew to her daughter, Angelina, and they soon began living together. Angelina called Andrew her stepfather and treated him like a friend. They enjoyed spending time together, often watching television, however. Over time, their love began to fade. Andrew and Stephanie started to argue, largely because Andrew was upset with Stephanie's job as a dancer in a nightclub. He wanted her to perform only for him and was unhappy that she continued to work there, even though Stephanie had quit her job for a while. Their arguments continued. One day, Angelina witnessed Andrew grabbing her mother's head and nearly slamming her into a wall, despite their troubled relationship. In 2012, 3 years after they first met, Andrew proposed to Stephanie and gave her a ring. She happily accepted his proposal and agreed to marry him. At the same time, Andrew started a new job at a correctional facility, bringing him closer to his dream of working in law enforcement. It seemed like their relationship had improved. But by early 2013, Stephanie decided to leave Andrew and rekindle her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was 13 years her senior. Stephanie and Michael first met when she was 19 and he was 32. They began dating in the early 20s, but their relationship ended after a while. In 2013, when Stephanie was 30, she rekindled her relationship with Michael a few months later. He proposed to her at the same place they had first met and gave her a $44 ring. Stephanie accepted his proposal, but just a month later, they had a serious argument at Michael's house. During the argument, Stephanie picked up a kitchen knife and swung it at him. Michael disarmed her, and it seemed like the matter was resolved. However, the conflict escalated during another argument. This time, Stephanie picked up a knife again, and Michael defended himself by using a chair as a shield. Stephanie stabbed the chair 4 times before leaving the room. Concerned for their safety, Michael gathered all the knives in the house and hid them. After these incidents, Michael decided that he did not want to marry Stephanie anymore and broke off the engagement just a month after the proposal. In late 2013, Stephanie got back together with Andrew and moved into a new house with him. After moving to their new home in Massachusetts, tensions flared again between Andrew and Stephanie. They decided it was time to plan for a pregnancy and set a wedding date for October 2014. On the evening of May 7, 2014, Stephanie put her daughter Angelina to bed on the second floor and went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Andrew was in the living room, watching TV. That night, they each had 2 glasses of wine. During the conversation, Andrew began asking Stephanie what she had done that week while he was at work. Andrew accused Stephanie of cheating on him, and the couple began to argue. After a while, Andrew expressed a desire to be intimate, but Stephanie refused. In a fit of anger, he threw her onto the couch, grabbed her by the neck with one hand, and tried to pull down her pants. He then grabbed a nearby weapon and pointed it at Stephanie's head, threatening her. When Andrew backed away, and Stephanie quickly ran into the kitchen to grab a knife, telling him to stay away from her. After this encounter, Andrew became even angrier. He grabbed her head and tried to smash it against the wall. In desperation, Stephanie attacked him with the knife. Andrew fell to the floor, and she began to cry loudly. Unable to find a phone to call 911, she ran to her neighbor, who was a nurse, for help. The neighbor opened the door. Not knowing what was happening, she saw Stephanie standing there in a t-shirt and sweatpants. Stephanie desperately called for help, saying that her fiancé was bleeding. She explained that she had injured him in self-defense because he had threatened her with a weapon. Hearing the emergency, the neighbor and his wife, who had worked as paramedics, quickly rushed to Andrew's house. When they entered, they saw the weapon Andrew had threatened his wife with lying on the sofa. They then found Andrew lying on the floor. His lips were black and blue, and there was a film covering his eyes. The neighbors found Andrew with a deep wound to his neck. They then took off his shirt to try to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, the neighbor's daughter ran into Andrew's house, called 911, and reported the situation. During this time, Stephanie was nearby, screaming and crying nonstop. At one point, she pushed Andrew, trying to wake him up. The neighbors yelled at Stephanie to stop and told her to be quiet. They then did everything they could to save him. At this point, Stephanie's screams woke up her daughter, Angelina, who was sleeping on the second floor. She left her room and went downstairs. Angelina saw a horrifying scene, prompting Stephanie to order her to go back to her room and away from the traumatic scene. At this point, Andrew had stopped breathing. The neighbors began CPR and continued until the police and ambulance arrived. Paramedics instructed the neighbors to stay back while they assessed Andrew's condition and took him to the hospital. The police then searched the house and discovered a kitchen knife on the bathroom floor, which was determined to be the murder weapon. Angelina was taken to stay with a relative, worried about her mother. She became hysterical. Stephanie was taken to the police station, where she was questioned for 3 hours. She cried and begged for information about Andrew. Expressing her love for him and her family, she was extremely distressed, saying that she did not care about her fate as long as Andrew was alive. During the questioning, Stephanie asked about her daughter. The police also noted a large bruise on Stephanie's face and a bite mark on her hand. At the end of the interrogation, they informed Stephanie that Andrew had died in the hospital. Upon hearing this, Stephanie confessed that she had attacked Andrew with a knife in self-defense, stating that she had no other choice. After her confession, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The medical examiner determined that Andrew died from blood loss due to his injuries, and his injuries indicated that he had not attempted to defend himself. There was a small amount of alcohol in his blood. On June 13, 2014, nearly a month after the incident, Andrew's father went to his son's house to change the locks and discovered that someone had cleaned the house and wiped all the blood off the walls and floors. It was revealed that Stephanie's sister had hired a cleaning service, which cleaned the house on May 20. Stephanie provided the police with a photo from 2010 showing her with a black eye. Claiming that Andrew had attacked her, she recounted an incident in which Andrew became angry over the t-shirt she was wearing. He allegedly grabbed her, threw her onto the bed, tore the t-shirt off, and then held a weapon to her head. Stephanie stated that when Andrew was angry, he could be very intimidating. Cell phone records revealed that the relationship between Andrew and Stephanie was troubled and turbulent. The police had to review 18 pages of text messages on one particular day in August 2013. A photo of a deep cut on Andrew's right forearm was found on his phone that same day. He texted Stephanie asking for help because the wound was bleeding profusely, but she replied that it was none of her business and that she would not assist him in calling the police. Stephanie admitted that they had an argument and that she had accidentally injured his hand in September 2013. Andrew sent Stephanie an angry text message accusing her of having an affair with Michael, and he insulted Michael in the process. In her reply, Stephanie admitted that she was indeed dating Michael. After this exchange, Stephanie sent private photos of herself to both Andrew and Michael within hours of each other. About a month later, in October 2013, Stephanie told Andrew that Michael wanted to adopt Angelina. In that text message, she stated that she did not care about his future. Andrew informed Stephanie that he planned to buy a house and wanted to meet her for a serious talk. Meanwhile, she also sent affectionate text messages to her ex-fiancé, Michael, who had called off their engagement. Stephanie invited Michael to go on vacation together and asked him for money for yacht. But Michael declined and suggested that she find another job. In December 2013, Stephanie went on yacht and began texting Andrew, sharing how much fun she was having. She also asked him if he had a girlfriend after the cruise. Stephanie reconciled with Andrew and moved into his new home. Their text messages revealed that she had become pregnant shortly after they got back together, although things seemed to be improving. Stephanie frequently expressed to Andrew that she felt abandoned by his long hours and lack of communication. In January 2014, at a doctor's appointment, Stephanie received the devastating news that her baby's heartbeat had stopped. She texted Andrew, saying that she felt like she had lost a part of herself. Andrew's parents noticed that their son was becoming more distant and that their communication was decreasing. In February 2014, just 3 months before the tragedy, Andrew's mother tried to contact him but was unable to reach him by phone. Concerned, she and her husband went to the house where Andrew lived with Stephanie. When they arrived, they saw both their cars in the driveway but received no response after ringing the doorbell several times. After about 15 minutes, Andrew finally opened the door to let his parents in. They spent some time talking and exploring the first floor of the new home. Shortly after, Stephanie came down from the second floor and told Andrew's parents to leave. They quietly left the house and drove away. Andrew's parents accused Stephanie of trying to prevent their son from communicating with the family. 8 years after the tragedy, in early 2022, the trial for the murder of Andrew Wagner began. Stephanie was placed under house arrest with a Jeep's ankle bracelet that tracked her movements. Prosecutors argued that Stephanie was guilty of premeditated murder, while Stephanie's defense attorney claimed she acted in self-defense. Prosecutors presented witnesses who testified that they saw Stephanie lose her temper and attack her fiancé multiple times. Stephanie's ex-husband, Michael, testified that she had confessed to him multiple times that Andrew Wagner had attacked her and hit her in the face. However, Michael never saw any bruises or injuries on her. A friend and co-worker at the nightclub where Stephanie worked stated that she often saw bruises on Stephanie's arms, which Stephanie covered up with makeup. Another friend, a dancer, recounted an incident where Andrew came to the club and got into a fight with Stephanie. After the fight, he sat on a bench and began drinking a cocktail that contained 2 bullets at the bottom of the glass. A co-worker informed security about this. But when they approached Andrew, the bullets were no longer in the glass. Stephanie's sister was called to testify in court. She stated that she had a close relationship with Stephanie and often discussed Stephanie's relationship with Andrew, whom she had met only 10 times. The sister observed bruises on Stephanie's legs, arms, face, and neck, and she believed that these injuries were caused by Andrew. Despite this, Stephanie continued to defend him to their family. Stephanie's sister shared another disturbing incident that occurred during a karaoke night with Stephanie and Andrew. During that night, the couple got into a fight due to Andrew's jealousy, and he attacked Stephanie in a bathroom stall. When she emerged, she was crying and her hair was disheveled. Stephanie begged her sister not to reveal what had happened. When they returned home, tensions flared again between Stephanie and Andrew, prompting her sister to comment on the bathroom fight. This remark only added to Andrew's anger, causing him to throw Stephanie to the ground and threaten her with a weapon. Fortunately, he soon released her. After the incident, Stephanie's sister urged her to break up with Andrew. Despite these events, neither of them reported the violence to the police. Stephanie reflected on what had happened. She felt confused and uncertain about her next steps, lacking money and housing. She lived with Andrew and endured his abuse. The judge found Stephanie Fernandez guilty of manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her daughter, Angelina Fernandez, is now studying to become a psychologist. She looks forward to working in court, supporting victims and their families, and eagerly anticipates the day she can be reunited with her mother. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dana Laskowski. At approximately 11 a.m. on August 31, 2001, a couple from a small town near Seattle, Washington, called the police to request a welfare check on their nanny, Dana Laskowski, 36. She had never been late before, but that day, she did not show up. Although Dana had been caring for the couple's children for a long time and had always been reliable, the police then went to Dana's house at the address provided by the couple but found no one at the door. The officers then began searching the surrounding area and peering through the windows. A second officer checked the rooms through the windows until he reached the living room. It was dark and quiet inside, and he noticed a woman lying on the sofa under a blanket. At first, the officer thought she was just sleeping. However, he wondered why she did not respond to the repeated knocking. When he shined his flashlight into the room, he saw the woman in an unusual position. With one hand behind her back, she was still, indicating that something was seriously wrong. All the windows were locked and the blinds were drawn, so the scene could only be seen clearly from the inside. Fortunately for the police, the back door was open, suggesting that the criminal had entered and left through that door. The police entered Dana's home and discovered drops of blood on the floor, some of which appeared to be smeared, indicating that there had been an effort to wipe them away. Dana was dead, and there were no signs of abuse. Bruises were visible on her neck, elbows, and knees. An autopsy revealed multiple fractures. The medical examiner determined that Dana died from strangulation. The police believe that the perpetrator entered the home with the intention of killing her. Not by accident, they found a broken window in the basement, which they suspect was the killer's point of entry. While some valuables were missing from Dana's residence, it appeared that furniture and items had been thrown from drawers onto the floor. However, this looked more like a staged crime scene than a sign of a robbery. As the police walked through the kitchen, they noticed a knife rack that had been completely untouched. This could indicate that the attacker had carefully planned the crime in advance. Typically, victims would be struck in the face or head to disorient them, but there were no signs of such injuries on Dana. It appeared that Dana had been strangled instantly. Forensic experts understand that strangulation is not as simple as it appears. It is a lengthy process that requires considerable strength and endurance. An autopsy found only a single mark on Dana's neck, suggesting that her attacker had held her down. When the police discovered that Dana was the mother of 9-year-old triplets, they were anxious to search her home for the children. Fortunately, they discovered that the children were not present at the time of the attack. The events that unfolded shocked the entire local community. Dana was known for her kindness and sensitivity, making her an unlikely victim of a violent crime. She avoided conflict and did not participate in illegal activities. The police compiled a list of suspects when they began investigating messages from the security service regarding Dana's acquaintances. To all who knew her, she was considered a creative and caring person. Dana's creativity stemmed from her father, a highly recognized artist, while her caring nature was inherited from her mother. This nurturing trait guided her life path. Growing up, she often babysat and was highly regarded by her neighbors for her skills. Dana aspired to open her own private kindergarten more than anything. She longed to be a mother, but this dream proved difficult to achieve. In 1989, when she was 24, she met a man named Sam. Romance quickly blossomed between the young couple, and they were married within months. Dana longed to start a family, but she faced infertility challenges. After 4 years of treatment, she learned she was pregnant with triplets, 2 boys and a girl. It was a moment she and her husband had long awaited. However, new challenges arose. Dana became famous when she shared her story with a local newspaper in 1992, discussing the difficulties she faced throughout her pregnancy. In her 5th month, she was hospitalized and told by doctors that she could give birth within 72 hours and that they might lose their baby girl. The couple cried all night over the news. Dana was then advised to rest completely at the clinic. Miraculously, she managed to carry the pregnancy to 8 months. This was a difficult period, but also a significant victory for her, something she often talked about later. In April 1993, she gave birth to triplets. The girl was the smallest, weighing just 1.5 kg. While the boys each weighed around 2 kg, the couple began to face new challenges when it came to raising children, which was not easy. However, Dana handled the situation very well. In 1996, she was interviewed as a local celebrity for having given birth to triplets. When asked about raising 3 children at once, she humorously recounted the moment when she was so exhausted that she went to the shops in her pajamas and slippers. Tragically, Dana, the proud mother of 3, was found strangled in her own living room. The police are investigating her surroundings to determine who might be responsible. It was revealed that in 2000, after 11 years of marriage, Dana chose to divorce Sam and raise the children on her own, along with her 3 children. Her 17-year-old niece, Amanda, who frequently ran away from home, and a friend named Emily Launborg also moved in with Dana after the tragedy. The police found very little evidence at the scene. They needed to interview all of Dana's relatives, starting with her ex-husband Sam. Initially, there were suspicions surrounding him. The police tried to inform him of the tragedy, but were unsuccessful. They also needed to check on the triplets, who were believed to be with Sam at the time. Sam did not answer calls for several days, raising serious concerns about his involvement. However, Sam eventually called the police back, explaining that he had gone camping with the children and was unaware of the situation. He said they had no cell service at their campsite, so they were unable to listen to any voice messages from family members upon returning from the trip. Sam and the children were shocked to discover multiple voice messages from the police, family, and friends, all relaying the tragic news of Dana's death and the urgent search for Sam and the children. At this point, Sam became the prime suspect in the case. The police suspected that he may have intentionally run away and kidnapped the children. The couple may have had ongoing disputes over child custody, alimony, and unresolved issues from their divorce, which could have provided him with a possible motive. The police discovered that Sam was unhappy with the court's custody ruling. He wanted to spend more time with the children, but his access was severely restricted. Additionally, Dana had moved away, making it difficult for him to visit and be with the children. Several witnesses noted that he was greatly affected by divorce, viewing her actions as an attempt to tear their family apart. However, he never acted cruelly or aggressively toward her or the children. The police quickly noticed that he was a tall man, indicating that he had the physical strength to handle Dana. Their suspicions grew as they spoke with him. He refused to provide fingerprints and a DNA sample, claiming that he did not want to be named as a suspect. Sam also mentioned that his DNA samples were at the Dana house because he frequently visited during meetings with the children. He had several cuts on his legs, which he said he received while playing baseball with his sons, a claim that was later verified. Sam insisted that he had been with his sons the entire time. 3 hours away from Dana's house, he even had a gas station receipt to back up his alibi. The triplets confirmed that they had been with their father the entire time and that he had not left to go on any long trips. While it was theoretically possible that Sam could have driven 3 hours to the house, committed the act, and returned while the children were asleep, this scenario seemed unlikely. A caring father would not have left his children alone in the woods for 6-7 hours, and the children repeatedly claimed that he had been with them the entire time. When the children woke up at night, he would have gently covered them with a blanket. It seemed improbable that they would have been forced to lie in such a situation, especially since their statements were completely consistent. As a result, Sam was quickly eliminated as a suspect after these events. Sam's 3 children moved in with him now. It was necessary to investigate other potential suspects, but this proved challenging. Even Dana's niece, Amanda, who lived with her most of the time and probably knew her better than anyone else, had no idea who could have harmed her. Amanda described her aunt as her second mother and best friend. She stated that she was not home the night Dana was murdered and therefore did not know if Dana was expecting visitors. Dana was known to be quite sociable, often welcoming friends at all hours. She was so trusting that she often left her back door unlocked, allowing anyone to enter. Dana was also a very attractive woman, which could have attracted the attention of dangerous people. The police found the family's behavior quite alarming and contacted them to conduct a welfare check on Dana. It was clear that they knew something, which led the police to question them again. They were the ones who hired Dana as a nanny. When asked by the police about the situation, they shared that, in Dana's neighborhood, there was a man named Patrick who was installing internet cable. He met Dana unexpectedly and, for a month, kept asking her out on dates. He left poems and notes on her back door, which she ignored. According to the family who hired Dana, she had no interest in Patrick. However, his letters became increasingly alarming and disturbing as he began to stalk her and detail her activities at specific times before her death. Dana even contacted a friend, urging her to ask the police to review her phone records if anything happened to her. She expressed that Patrick's constant phone calls frightened her. The police investigated this information and confirmed that an unknown phone number had called Dana multiple times on the night of her murder. They identified a white construction truck as being involved in the calls, and several witnesses reported seeing a similar vehicle behind Dana's home that evening. The police contacted Patrick's employer, who confirmed the witnesses' accounts. As a result, the police quickly obtained a search warrant for Patrick's home. From the start, Patrick was uncooperative and aggressive, which raised suspicions about him. He seemed reluctant to talk to the police. Initially, Patrick believed that the police were questioning him because Dana had filed a complaint against him. He admitted to stalking her and exhibiting obsessive behavior. However, when he was informed that the police were investigating Dana's murder, his demeanor changed completely. He became frightened, confused, and upset, and began to cooperate with the investigation. He provided his fingerprints and claimed that he had nothing to do with the murder. He also agreed to let the police search his home. Despite his previous objections, during the search, Patrick appeared to be very upset about Dana's death. During the investigation, the police found several letters addressed to a woman that were violent in nature. However, the details and descriptions of this woman did not match Dana. These letters were actually addressed to Patrick's ex-wife and reflected his unresolved anger toward her. Patrick recounted his activities on the night Dana was killed. He said he went to work and then attended a party with friends. Initially, the police doubted his story, but several witnesses confirmed his alibi, making him seem less likely to be the killer. The truck associated with Patrick was investigated and found to be unrelated to a vehicle seen near Dana's house. It belonged to another employee of the same organization. As a result, Patrick was removed from the suspect list. However, the police still had some doubts about him, as there was a possibility that witnesses might have been dishonest. The police then turned their attention to a third suspect, Dana's new boyfriend. Michael lived in Canada. It was revealed that Michael had a hot temper and was aggressive. Dana confided in a friend that if anything happened to her, the police should investigate Michael. They then decided to go to Canada to talk to him. Michael admitted that there were problems in their relationship on the night of the murder. He had a long phone conversation with Dana, during which she seemed unusually distant and cold. Even ignoring his words at the end of the conversation, this behavior made him extremely angry. Michael later planned to meet Dana in person to discuss their relationship, but he was unable to contact her, and he was not allowed to cross the border. His alibi was confirmed. He was still in another country and did not cross the border, which cleared him of all suspicions. The police soon focused on Dana's niece, Amanda, who left a note in the condolence book after Dana's funeral. In the note, she apologized to Dana for not being a better niece and stated that she was now sober. There was something about the way she wrote that suggested it was a message of remorse to Dana. It was clear that Dana cared deeply for her niece Amanda. She welcomed Amanda and her friends, often inviting them to her home, where Amanda would feed them and sometimes provide money or shelter when they needed it. The police then brought Amanda in for questioning. She mentioned a dangerous person in her group named Blaine, revealing that he had strangled her When she refused his advances, Amanda suspected that something similar might have happened to Dana. Amanda also recalled seeing Blaine with scratches on his arm after Dana's death. Blaine had a history of drug-related offenses. When the police tried to find him, they discovered that he was on probation and had fled the state, making him a wanted man. They eventually found him in Georgia, and the police requested his extradition. Unfortunately, it took time to resolve all the administrative issues, so the police decided to investigate the rest of the group. During this time, a member of their group ended up in jail. The police chose to speak to him directly. He seemed just as suspicious as Blaine, but quickly claimed that his gang was not responsible for Dana's death. He revealed that Emily Lauenborg, Amanda's best friend, was a frequent visitor to their home. Emily and Amanda were rebellious teenagers who often stayed with Dana. Initially, the police were skeptical of the information they received. They felt that Emily, a short, slender 17-year-old girl, might not have been strong enough to take on a grown woman. However, as they spoke to other members of the group, the investigation took a different direction. They learned from multiple sources that Emily was known for her incredible physical strength, which belied her appearance. Emily had a history of fighting and reckless behavior. Witnesses described an incident in which she overpowered a much larger adult man. Emily's actions were quite violent. She had tortured and killed animals. The teenagers provided the police with crucial information, revealing that Emily's preferred method of strangulation involved placing a person's hands behind their back. This technique closely resembled the position of Dana's body after her death, raising serious concerns for the police. Emily was then questioned by the police. She denied all charges, claiming that her friends had lied and tried to implicate her. However, she was unable to provide an alibi for the time of the murder. A search warrant was issued for Emily's room, where the police discovered some clothing belonging to Dana. It was revealed that Emily had worn one of these blouses to the funeral. Additionally, Emily's diary was found, containing disturbing entries. One entry expressed her desire to kill, indicating her wish to harm someone and escape without facing consequences. In her diary, she wrote that, after an argument with Amanda, she wanted to strangle her, according to Emily's parents. She left the house on the night of the murder, as she often did. Being a rebellious teenager, she announced that she was going to sleep over at a friend's house, which was typical of her behavior, so her parents didn't question her. With all the evidence the police had gathered being circumstantial, they decided to employ a specific tactic. They brought Amanda in for questioning and told her that they were aware of her lies. Without revealing any specifics, this approach proved effective. Amanda, Dana's niece, admitted to Emily's involvement. She revealed that both she and Emily had returned to Dana's house on the night of the murder while under the influence of drugs. They had used various substances throughout the night to the point where they could not recall which ones they had taken. The girls entered the house through an open back door and began rummaging through Dana's belongings in search of money. Dana noticed them and confronted them about their actions. When Dana asked them to leave, Emily became angry and insisted that she would not leave without the money. When Dana refused to give them cash, Emily became enraged and attacked her, strangling her. Amanda was so frightened that she turned away and closed her eyes to avoid witnessing anything. She did not see her friend confront her aunt, but she heard a crack, which she interpreted as a bone breaking, followed by a final gasp that signaled the end of the struggle. After the attack, Amanda and Emily grabbed the two cats and left. Emily attacked Dana, who had cared for her like a mother. In a sudden outburst of violent rage, Emily interpreted Dana's kindness as a sign of weakness and took advantage of it. She was not accustomed to rejection, which made her extremely angry. The police speculated that drugs may have played a role, but others believed that deeper issues were at play. Dana had objected to Emily's friendship with a dangerous person. Having noticed Emily's behavior deteriorating over time, the police did not have strong evidence against Emily. So, they focused on Amanda as their best chance for conviction. They offered Amanda a deal if she testified again before the grand jury. All charges against her would be dropped. Granting her immunity, Amanda accepted the deal. However, the prosecution's case in the Supreme Court remained weak. Emily was eventually offered a plea deal, which she accepted. Admitting her guilt, this allowed her to avoid a harsh sentence. Emily Launborg was later sentenced to 7 years in prison. Emily changed her name and got married. She had 2 children, but later divorced. She is no longer in contact with Amanda. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Mike and Missy McIvor. During a tropical storm in the Florida Keys, Missy McIvor and Mike were murdered in their home. Missy was 9 months pregnant at the time, which made the case especially heartbreaking, not only for the police investigating, but also for the entire state of Florida today. We explore this shocking murder. Susan Michelle Emil, also known as Missy, was born on July 24, 1962, in Titusville, Pennsylvania, from a young age. She had the ability to draw others in. She had a warm smile, a caring nature, and a kind heart. Missy had a deep love for children, which she pursued by becoming an elementary school teacher, a dream she cherished and worked hard to achieve. Mike McIvor was born on April 15, 1961, in Cincinnati, Ohio. His parents had a deep passion for airplanes, a relatively new invention at the time. His mother worked as a flight attendant, while his father was an airline captain for Mike's family. Airplanes were not only a source of income, but also a shared love. Many childhood photos show Mike disassembling and reassembling planes with his family. Mike pursued his passion from childhood all the way to his career and eventually became a professional pilot in 1987. He met a girl named Missy, and he fell in love with her immediately. They first laid eyes on each other at a nightclub and talked non-stop all night. They felt like they were destined to be together. So they decided to start a serious relationship. 2 years later, Mike and Missy moved to Key Largo, where they bought a spacious house in May 1990. They got married in a small ceremony in their backyard. Everyone who witnessed their marriage agreed that they were a perfect couple. Mike was healthy and successful, while Missy was beautiful, caring, and kind. They were both good people and had the potential to be wonderful parents. In January 1991, Missy found out she was pregnant. They began converting the living room into a nursery and were excited to plan every detail for their first child. The tropical storm hit the area in late August. Bringing heavy rains and strong winds, Mike and Missy attended Lamaze classes together. They had chosen a name for their child and were looking forward to Missy giving birth naturally as soon as class ended. The sky darkened with ominous clouds, and lightning flashed in the distance. That Lamaze class would be the last time anyone saw Missy and Mike alive. The storm hit on the night of August 21st, and after it passed, everyone returned to their normal routines. Children began arriving at Key Largo Elementary School, and teachers discussed the terrible storm that had just occurred. However, Missy did not show up for work that day. Whenever she took a day off, she always called ahead to avoid worrying her students. Demonstrating her dedication to her job, Missy's absence was not only unusual, but also alarming. Worried, her colleagues called Missy's home, but no one answered. They continued to call Mike's sister, Sharon, to inquire about the situation after hearing the news. But Sharon called Missy's home, but no one answered her either. She tried again, but still, no one picked up. Strangely, even Mike and Missy's answering machine was not working. Sharon informed Missy's colleagues that she was unable to contact her, prompting them to visit Missy and Mike's home. The door was locked, and all the curtains were drawn except for one, which was only partially open, allowing the colleagues to catch a glimpse of the living room. They were shocked to find a person lying motionless on the floor, with only the person's feet visible. Her colleagues felt worried after witnessing such a disturbing scene through the window. Missy's neighbor then noticed something unusual and decided to check it out. When Missy's colleagues informed him about the situation inside the house, feeling that something was wrong. The neighbor decided to break down the door. When they entered the house, they found Mike lying on his back on the floor. His arms and legs spread out, his head was wrapped in tape, his mouth was also covered with tape, and white socks were placed in front of him. Shocked, they quickly called the police to report the incident. The police arrived promptly to investigate the scene. While searching the house, they found a shoe print on Mike's throat and a metal bar in the kitchen. The police believe the metal bar was the murder weapon and that the killer may have stomped on Mike's throat before killing him in the master bedroom. Missy's body was found. Her wrists were tied to her ankles with what appeared to be a clothesline, and a tie was wrapped tightly around her neck. 2 pieces of tape covered her eyes. Missy had been abused while she was pregnant and then strangled to death. In the following months, the townspeople began installing alarm systems and purchasing weapons, worried that they might be the next victims. Meanwhile, the police were trying to determine what had happened. They believed that the killer had cut the phone lines and entered Missy's house using a ladder left by a contractor. The timing of the attack during a storm allowed him to enter and exit the house undetected. Interestingly, the killer only had a metal bar with him and used items found in the house to tie up his victims. Suggesting that he was experienced, DNA was collected from the crime scene, including semen samples found on various parts of Missy's body. The results of the autopsy confirmed that both Mike and Missy died from strangulation. Mike suffered injuries from being struck with the metal bar, but he also had severe bruising on his abdomen, indicating that he had been kicked in the stomach. Additionally, his throat was severely damaged from being trampled. The strangulation marks on Missy's neck indicated that she had fought back for some time, forcing the killer to attempt multiple strangulation maneuvers before ultimately killing her. Tragically, her child, Kyle, died from a lack of oxygen in the womb during the attack. Police believe that Missy was the primary target and that the perpetrator may have known Mike. As a result, the police began questioning people she knew. Police eliminated 3 potential suspects after they volunteered to provide DNA samples. The police then noticed that some of Mike's business dealings did not appear to be entirely transparent. They discovered that Mike had made several trips to a notorious drug manufacturing center. During the height of Miami's illegal drug trade, the police investigated Mike's business dealings, but ultimately, this investigation went nowhere. As there was no evidence that Mike was involved in any illegal activity, time passed without much progress. Then, unexpectedly, there was a breakthrough in the case. Renowned FBI psychologist Dale Hinman was brought in and used the available evidence to create a detailed psychological profile of the killer. She suggested that the killer may have a criminal record, that he knew at least some aspects of Missy's habits, and that he may have been obsessed with her. This was a major turning point in the investigation. A police officer has been trying to catch a suspect named Thomas Overton for years. Thomas is believed to be responsible for the attack and murder of a 20-year-old girl. The girl was last seen at a movie theater where Thomas worked, and her body was later discovered wrapped in a tarp with popcorn kernels nearby. Although the police suspect Thomas, there is no direct evidence linking him to the crime. Thomas later became the prime suspect in the murders of Missy and Mike. However, there is still no direct evidence linking him to their murders. On October 6, 1996, Thomas was arrested while committing an armed robbery and was imprisoned for this crime. He later injured himself in a failed escape attempt while being transported to prison. He asked the paramedics to provide him with gauze. The police collected DNA from the swab and compared it to evidence found at Missy's home, confirming his involvement in the crime. Shortly thereafter, Mike confessed to the murder. He had previously worked at a gas station that Missy often visited, and he had attempted to flirt with her, which she found offensive. She confided in others about the encounter, especially since she was 8 months pregnant at the time, the night before her death. Missy told Mike's sister, Sharon, that Mike had approached her again. This time, more aggressively. She had no idea that Mike had seen her address on a check she had written and had been stalking her for days. Thomas regularly visited Missy's home to spy on her. Revealing his disturbing obsession with her, he noticed contractors coming in to build a nursery for Missy's family on August 21st. During a storm, Thomas put on a mask, black military fatigues, and gloves, and went to Missy's house. He climbed a ladder to the nursery, opened the glass door, and quietly entered. At that time, Mike was in the kitchen and was probably unaware that Thomas was coming up behind him. Suddenly, Thomas hit Mike on the head with a metal bar, causing Mike to instinctively fight back. A struggle broke out, but Thomas eventually overpowered Mike and strangled him to death during this attack. Missy entered the room, saw what was happening, screamed, and ran to her bedroom. Thomas followed her, and in his confession, he claimed that she begged for her life and tried to tell him that she was pregnant. However, her words had no effect on him. He then killed Missy and abused her. The trial of Thomas Overton began on October 17, 1998. Prosecutors presented new evidence, including photos of Missy's pregnant belly that Thomas took after she was killed. During the trial, Thomas smiled and gestured towards Mike and Missy's family. Throughout the proceedings, he remained cold and cruel, seemingly enjoying the attention and considering himself a victor. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his guilt, on March 18, 1999, Thomas Overton was sentenced to death for the murders of Mike and Missy McIver. He is currently on death row and has shown no remorse for his actions. Mike's parents died shortly after his death. Unable to cope with the loss, Mike's sister, Sharon, described Thomas as the embodiment of evil. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Samantha Fraser. Samantha Fraser was born on July 22, 1980 in Australia, to Janine and Trevor Fraser. She was cheerful, intelligent, and active. She received an award for outstanding academic achievement in high school and later served as the captain of the cheerleading team at university, where she earned a degree in psychology. Samantha first met Adrian Basham in 2005 after dating for a while. They got married in 2007. They moved to a coastal town east of Melbourne, where Samantha's parents lived. She worked as a psychologist at a local medical center. Adrian was employed for a mining project on Barrow Island, located off the coast of Western Australia. Each time he returned home from his work rotation, he insisted that the house be perfectly organized. His expectations were extreme. For instance, all the cans in the pantry had to be arranged so that their labels were facing outward. If this standard was not met, it could lead to serious arguments. Despite the strain in their relationship and Adrian's frequent absences, Samantha's patience and good nature helped them navigate their challenges and maintain their life together. They eventually had 3 children. With her professional skills, kindness, and ability to connect with others, Samantha became a cherished member of the community. However, many were unaware of the struggles she faced in her personal life. Their relationship was plagued by abuse and controlling behavior. In 2014, Samantha was a victim of violence at the hands of Adrian, and this occurred again in 2016. This time, she chose to speak out and reported his actions. By then, Samantha lived in fear of Adrian, believing he was tracking her movements through his phone. He seemed to know everything she did, although she had filed a police report about his interference in her life. She worried it wouldn't stop him from hurting her again. After years of a controlling and fearful marriage, Samantha and Adrian finalized their separation in April 2017. Initially, Samantha moved back in with her parents, but later, she returned to the house she had shared with Adrian and their children. Meanwhile, Adrian moved in with his father in Paynesville, east of Phillip Island, and tried to make Samantha's life difficult by causing financial problems. He threatened to take away her home, savings, and other valuable possessions. Things escalated when Adrian warned Samantha that violent criminals could easily break into her home. Concerned for her safety as Adrian's behavior became more erratic, Samantha installed surveillance cameras, changed the locks, and took additional steps to secure her home. Peter Matthews, A friend of Samantha and Adrian learned from Adrian about his plans regarding Samantha. Adrian suggested that he would make Samantha suffer in various ways, believing that if he couldn't have her, then no one else can have her. By 2018, Samantha began to feel more confident. She began dating Wayne Foster, and their relationship developed rapidly. For the first time in a long while, she felt she could trust someone and relax on the eve of her birthday. Samantha shared with her friends that she hoped she was entering a new phase of her life. However, someone close to her mentioned seeing Adrian on Phillip Island, where she lived. This news shocked her and revived old fears. She was determined to handle it better this time, reminding herself to be cautious and not let fear take over. She realized Adrian had already consumed too much of her time and energy, and she wanted to reclaim her life from him. However, she still had unresolved issues with him. In the meantime, Samantha was scheduled to testify against Adrian in a court case involving violence, and just the thought of it filled her with anxiety about how the confrontation would unfold. On Sunday, July 22, 2018, Samantha celebrated her 38th birthday joyfully and surrounded by friends. They baked a cake together, and everyone noticed how relaxed and optimistic Samantha was about her future. The following day, she drove the children to school around 11 a.m. Adrian sneaked into her house and waited for her while she had coffee with her friend Leah Matthews. After their coffee, they hugged goodbye, and Leah promised to call her later. 2 hours later, Samantha returned home and parked in the garage before she could even get out of the car. She was shocked to see Adrian when she was still sitting in the driver's seat, feeling frightened. Samantha, who weighed only 57 kg and was much smaller than Adrian, bravely tried to defend herself. Unfortunately, Adrian overpowered her, brutally beat her, and then hanged her in the garage. It is believed that he cleaned the blood from her hair and face, removed her white shirt, and fled the scene. Surveillance cameras captured him running out of the house at 2 p.m. with the hood of his jacket pulled over part of his face. On that day, her children could not be picked up by her. At 4 p.m., the principal of the elementary school called the police to report that the children's mother, Samantha, had not arrived to pick them up to ensure everything was okay. The police went to Samantha's house. After checking the area and finding nothing unusual, they broke in by breaking the garage door. Inside, they found Samantha. She was hanging in the garage, bloodied and bruised, with a rope tied in a complex knot around her neck. She wore a black t-shirt and pants, and her feet were bare. There were clear signs of violence. Her right cheek and the area around her eye was swollen. Her hair was wet and fell over her face, and there was a reddish-purple mark above her right eye. An overturned step stool lay nearby among various unusual items. The police contacted the Criminal Investigations Department and secured the area to protect the crime scene. While they waited for the investigative team to arrive, the police noted blood above and below the knot on the rope, as well as blood beneath Samantha's feet, which were nearly touching the ground. No suicide note was found. Given these details, the arriving investigators classified the case as a homicide. After examining the scene, detectives searched Samantha's Land Cruiser and discovered her wallet, diary, and mobile phone inside. Notably, her purse contained $9.5 in cash, which had no clear explanation. The investigation team decided to request footage from surveillance cameras. They also investigated the homicide by examining the utensils in Samantha's kitchen, found 2 glasses on the table and traces of blood near the dishwasher in the garage. They also looked for fingerprints on the walls and shoe prints on the floor. On that same Monday, James, Adrian's father, noticed that his son returned home late on his motorcycle. Adrian parked the motorcycle in the garage, and James was alarmed to see him riding at a dangerous speed. He also noticed a scar or scratch on Adrian's nose. When James asked about it, Adrian explained that he must have gotten it from a tree branch during his ride. Adrian looked tired, making James think it was from the long journey. Adrian mentioned that he had been in a bad mood all day. Later, Adrian used baby wipes to wipe off what he described as just insects that had clung to the motorcycle during the ride. Samantha's relatives, still reeling from her tragic death, expressed deep confusion to the authorities about the apparent motive. They emphasized how dedicated Samantha was to her children, insisting that it was unimaginable for her to have abandoned them or taken her own life. The local community mourned the tragedy, displaying white ribbons on mailboxes and shop windows throughout the town. On the morning of Tuesday, July 24, after assembling a board of images featuring potential suspects, a tactical intelligence officer presented evidence linking 12 items to Adrian. Soon after, James received an unexpected call from the police inquiring about his son. A few hours later, when James heard the news about Samantha, he urged Adrian to cooperate with the authorities. When the police came to their home, Adrian followed his father's advice and listened in silence. However, a fresh scratch on his nose hinted at something more. Lacking sufficient evidence against him, the officers left, hoping the investigation would progress. On July 26, 2018, the police arrived at James's home with a search warrant for a motorcycle. During the forensic examination, they found several bloodstains, including one on the fuel tank. Forensic experts also discovered DNA samples on the handle and under Samantha's nails. They determined that the severe head injuries Samantha sustained resulted in a traumatic brain injury. The incident received national media attention, and a Facebook fundraising page created to support Samantha's children. At the time, the 3 children were being cared for by Samantha's parents, who were on vacation in the United States. Upon hearing about the tragedy, the grandparents returned to care for their grandchildren. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, and the examination supported claims that Samantha could not have taken her own life, as she would not have left her children alone. The DNA analysis results provided undeniable evidence that led to Adrian's arrest and charge for Samantha's murder. On Friday, August 10, 2018, family and friends gathered to honor Samantha, along with the close-knit community of Phillip Island, who came to say goodbye to their beloved local psychologist. Around 400 people filled the hall, with some guests carrying bouquets of flowers. The wait for the trial was particularly lengthy, during which Samantha's eldest daughter struggled with anxiety, guilt, and even thoughts of self-harm. Her younger siblings experienced similar feelings, but all family members and close friends offered strong support to the children. When it was announced that the trial would take place in 2022, Samantha's eldest daughter spent 4 long months preparing what she wanted to say to Adrian. The trial began in the early months of 2022 at the Supreme Court of Victoria. During the proceedings, she bravely took the stand and looked her father in the eyes as she told him that his actions had not broken her. In fact, her presence was enough to show this. As she turned to the court to ensure that her mother would receive justice, she explained to her father that her actions were motivated by her love for her family, friends, and herself. As she was still grappling with the trauma of her mother's murder and the deep emptiness it left in her life, Samantha's second daughter, who was 9 years old, testified in court that her father had taken away the best part of her heart. Additionally, Janine spoke about her youngest grandchild in court, revealing that he was so terrified of his father that he built a fortress in his bed on court days to shield himself from the monster, despite the pain of his children. Adrian attempted to alleviate his own guilt over his horrific crime. Adrian's defense team acknowledged that he had attacked Samantha and caused her injury, but insisted that he did not kill her. They argued that Adrian acted impulsively and without intent when he arrived at Samantha's house around noon, claiming his original purpose was not violent. However, the defense did not provide any evidence to support their case. In contrast, the prosecutors contended that Adrian had attacked Samantha, resulting in her death, and then tried to conceal his crime by hanging her on the garage gates. Adrian attempted to convince the jury that another person had assaulted Samantha and that she took her own life as a result. After weeks of deliberation, the jury found Adrian guilty of intentional murder. The judge stated that Adrian acted out of selfishness, killing his ex-wife to avoid facing court proceedings related to domestic violence incidents in 2014 and 2016. In late February 2023, Adrian Basham was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 30 years to serve before he can be considered for parole. When the verdict was announced, Samantha's family applauded, while Samantha's eldest daughter watched her father's reaction to his sentence. In subsequent statements, she said that the damage inflicted by Adrian was incomparable to anything else. As they left the court, Adrian briefly stopped to look at his children outside the courthouse. Trevor, the primary guardian for his grandchildren, declared that justice had prevailed. Samantha's friends were also present, viewing the verdict as a significant milestone in similar cases. To further this cause, they established a fund dedicated to combating domestic violence. Lydia, a friend who had shared hugs with Samantha before her death, noted that starting the fund was the only truly positive outcome amidst this tragedy. Hello everyone. Today, we will learn about another case, the case of Robin Baxter. The suburb of Louisville, New Albany, was one of the most prosperous areas in the state of Indiana, USA. Situated on the banks of the Ohio River, it was a lively community known for its peaceful atmosphere as well as its vibrant nightlife. Young people here enjoyed a lot of entertainment. Some people would regularly host parties, and there was always a way to spend the evening in the company of friends. When Robin moved to the area, she quickly made new friends, sociable and friendly. She planned to pursue an education and eventually get married within a few months of moving. Robin met a boyfriend named Christopher Baxter. This was her first serious relationship, as she had only had brief, unsuccessful dates in high school at that time. Robin was focused on her college studies and not too concerned about dating, however. Everything changed when Christopher entered her life. He was older, and despite her youth and inexperience, she managed to connect with him emotionally. They began dating and eventually got married. After their wedding, Robin found a job while continuing her studies, planning to have children with her husband. Then, in mid-June 1990, Robin suddenly disappeared for several days. Christopher tried to contact her by phone, but received no answer. Christopher reached out to her family in hopes of finding her. He explained that they had argued the night before, and when he woke up the next morning, she was gone. Christopher suspected that Robin had gone to stay with her parents after their fight. He wanted to apologize and bring her back home, but her family confirmed that she was not with them. Both he and Robin's family grew increasingly worried. The news that her husband didn't know where Robin was raised serious concerns. Robin's mother and sister, who lived nearby, got into a car and drove around town, hoping to find her. Christopher was doing the same thing. They searched the nearest residential areas, the vicinity of Christopher's house, the grocery store, and any other places where Robin might have gone. Unfortunately, they found no trace of her. Christopher and Robin's relatives contacted the police to report her missing. At the police station, he detailed how he and Robin's loved ones had already checked all her usual hangouts but found no signs of her. Initially, the officers didn't seem very interested in the report, as they believed an adult woman could take care of herself and wasn't required to inform anyone of her whereabouts. Christopher and Robin's family members rejected the idea that Robin simply disappeared without a trace. They believed it was unlikely she would vanish without informing anyone. Even if something unusual had happened, she would have likely reached out to her family at the first opportunity. Eventually, her family convinced the police that Robin might be in danger, which prompted them to begin a search for her, worried that the police might not act quickly enough. Christopher took matters into his own hands. He went to a local news station to report his wife's disappearance. Seeking help from the community, he shared information about Robin, including a photograph and a description of her clothing. At the time she went missing, Christopher hoped that Robin was with friends or relatives and was trying to reach out to everyone to gather any important information. Unfortunately, no one knew where she was or what might have happened to her. The following day, workers from the local power station went to inspect the sewer drains for maintenance after identifying a clog during their investigation. One technician noticed something alarming in the water that resembled a body. As a result, all work ceased, and the police were summoned. Along with divers who retrieved the body, it was a woman, found without clothing from the waist down, and she had sustained serious injuries to her head and face. Her body was sent for forensic examination to determine her identity. Christopher learned about this disturbing discovery and feared it might be his missing wife. After checking dental records, the medical examiner confirmed that the body was indeed Robin Baxter, given that the body was found in the river. Law enforcement initially considered the possibility of end one's own life. Suspecting that the woman might have drowned, they contacted Christopher to see if Robin could have taken her own life. However, Christopher stated that this was impossible, as Robin was afraid of water and could not swim. Even if she had been feeling desperate, he believed she would not have chosen that method. Christopher asserted that Robin did not have any mental health issues and was generally cheerful. With a bright future ahead of her, he was convinced that she had been murdered and that her body had been disposed of in the water. In a news conference, Christopher expressed his suspicions and stated that the person responsible for his wife's death would be brought to justice. Christopher informed her relatives about the tragic news, leaving everyone in shock. The severity of the situation was overwhelming for them based on the lack of clothing found. It appeared that Robin may have been abused and possibly fought back, which could have led to her death. This was a devastating blow for the entire family, as they never imagined such a turn of events. The medical examiner discovered multiple blunt force injuries on her head and face. The cause of death was identified as a traumatic brain injury caused by a severe blow to the back of her head, resulting in internal bleeding. It was determined that Robin had been repeatedly beaten before her body was disposed of in the river. The medical examiner indicated that she likely died before entering the water, as no water was found in her lungs, the possibility of abuse was quickly ruled out. No evidence was discovered. Detectives also dismissed the possibility of voluntary end her life. This was clearly ruled a murder, with evidence suggesting an attempted cover-up that hinted at an abuse to mislead the investigation. Detectives pieced together the events of the day. Robin disappeared and found that she had planned to attend a party hosted by her friends Douglas, Stephen, and Rick, who lived nearby. Witnesses confirmed that Robin did attend the party. Investigators discovered that all three men had minor legal issues in the past, but none were violent. They lived together to share living expenses. Her husband was familiar with them and distrusted them. Believing they were dangerous, he suspected that one or all of them were involved in her disappearance. Christopher even went to their house to confront them about Robin, but they denied any wrongdoing. Detectives later questioned Douglas, Stephen, and Rick individually. Each provided the same alibi, supporting one another's accounts and confirming that Robin was indeed at the party that evening. They stated there were no conflicts and that she was socializing with others. After 8 p.m., they claimed she simply left, and no one knew what happened to her afterward. The men spoke in a way that seemed consistent, repeating each other's statements without contradicting themselves. Even when faced with the detectives' tactics, however, it was possible that they had conspired to protect one another. At that time, law enforcement had no evidence against them, so they were released but remained on the list of suspects. Their statements led detectives to a new lead. That evening, the victim had spent significant time with one of the men. Eventually, she left the gathering with a person named Eugene, a friend and former friend from school. The police interviewed him, and he claimed he had walked Robin home because it was late. But could there be something more concerning behind this? Following this, a lengthy investigation phase began, during which detectives collected and analyzed information. The public's mood was tense. Residents feared that a dangerous criminal was on the loose in New Albany, creating a sense of insecurity. The motive for the crime was unclear, and there were no solid leads, heightening concerns about potential new victims. Amid this uncertainty, numerous rumors began to circulate, given the circumstances surrounding the party. Many locals speculated that Robin may have been involved in an affair. This speculation was particularly painful for Christopher, who refused to accept that his wife could lead a double life. He insisted he was unaware of any affairs and believed his wife was respectable and not promiscuous. When rumors of infidelity circulated, several witnesses informed the police that Robin might have had an affair with Eugene, the man she left the party with. Eugene had been her friend before she started dating Christopher, leading to speculation that she may have kept in touch with him and met secretly without her husband's knowledge. However, when the police questioned Eugene again, he denied having a serious relationship with Robin. He claimed they had only a few casual encounters in their youth and rarely communicated, describing their relationship as that of good acquaintances. There was no evidence to dispute his statement, making Eugene an unlikely suspect. As he had no motive to harm her, detectives also received a tip from an anonymous source stating that, on the night of Robin's disappearance, she was in a car with 3 men, including Rick, Stephen, and another man. The witness reported seeing the men making unwanted advances toward her, but Robin rejected them and appeared to be trying to escape. However, the witness did not see how the situation concluded when questioned again at the police station. The men confirmed they had been in the car with Robin until Eugene arrived, insisting that there was no harassment involved. The men claimed they lived together in a partnership that was more serious than friendship. Their living arrangement was peculiar, especially since rumors about unconventional relationships were circulating. The police later confirmed that there was insufficient evidence to charge any of the suspects. In the end, the detectives failed to uncover the murder weapon or any other crucial evidence. Robin had not been abused, and no foreign DNA was found on her body, although it was possible that it had been washed away. The case went cold. There were attempts to reopen the investigation and analyze the collected information with new technology, but no progress was made until 2011. That year, a new officer transferred from the patrol division to the Criminal Investigations Department, where his father had worked for 35 years and had become somewhat of a legend. For him, getting this role was a great privilege, so he was committed to investigating the case diligently and seeking justice. He had heard about Robin Baxter, who had gone missing in 1990. The investigator reviewed all the collected information again. From the start, the investigator was puzzled as to why the case remained unresolved. Many suspects had alibis and were released without further questioning. Upon reviewing their backgrounds, the detective noted that they did not fit the profile of criminals. He first considered a crucial question: why would anyone want to harm Robin? Described as a respectable woman, Robin was married, not involved in crime, and had no legal troubles. Her disappearance and brutal murder were baffling, as they seemed utterly disconnected from her life. The archive documents included many names of witnesses, and it was important to speak with all of them again. While reviewing the documents, the detective discovered a crucial note. Several individuals on the list had not been contacted by the police in 1990. One of them was Christopher's neighbor, Charles, who was thought to have valuable information during the initial investigation. Attempts to reach him were unsuccessful. Therefore, it was decided to meet with him and to follow up with all the suspects from the original investigation. 3 men, Douglas, Rick, and Stephen, were the primary suspects, but the investigator was disappointed to find that all of them had died from AIDS. Despite this, further investigation showed that none of them had a motive for the attack. They are gay, which made them unlikely suspects in Robin's murder. Although she had interacted with them often, their relationship was strictly platonic. Eugene, Robin's ex-friend, remained a suspect in the case. As the police examined the evidence, they began to focus more on Robin's husband, Christopher. The brutality of the attack suggested that the killer was likely familiar with the victim. It appeared that there was a personal motive behind the murder, possibly stemming from jealousy or revenge. The detective suspected that both Christopher and Eugene might have been involved in a love triangle, giving them both reasons for a violent confrontation. There were also rumors that Robin had been having an affair, prompting the investigator to look for connections between the suspects and the crime. Meanwhile, the new detective interviewed Charles, who lived next door to the Christopher's house in 1990. Charles mentioned that he had never been questioned about the case, but that he had valuable information. He reported hearing screams and signs of a struggle coming from Christopher's house after midnight. On the night Robin disappeared, he saw Robin outside, wearing a black t-shirt, denim shorts, and flip-flops. She looked visibly shaken and had what appeared to be blood on her face. Despite his offer of help, she refused. Charles noted that he was an experienced builder and frequently handled renovations. The day after their argument, Christopher came to him with a question about how to replace the drywall in a room. This was surprising because Christopher had recently completed renovations and had previously sought advice on similar topics. This raised questions about why he needed to replace new materials. A troubling discovery was made in the Baxter family archive, a photograph showing Christopher with a metal rod. Robin's relatives claimed he referred to it as his equalizer, which he kept by his bed for self-defense against potential attacks. This equalizer mysteriously vanished and has never been located. Detectives now had information suggesting that Christopher was likely responsible for his wife's death, possibly using the metal rod to beat her. It appeared that Christopher had to replace the drywall because the murder took place in their bedroom, which was left stained with blood, and he wanted to eliminate the evidence by starting renovations. While this theory seemed reasonable, concrete evidence was needed to charge him. Law enforcement managed to access what was believed to be the crime scene, where new residents now lived in the bedroom. The drywall was still present. The homeowner reported accidentally damaging the wall while moving furniture and discovered something interesting behind it: a heavy aluminum rod, a towel, and a glove. These items were collected and sent to a lab for analysis, where both Christopher's DNA and Robin's blood were found on them. This evidence suggested that there was now enough to put Chris behind bars. Earlier, Christopher told the police that he had argued with his wife but denied killing her. He explained that on June 19, 1990, he had a serious argument with her and then went to bed. The next morning, he was surprised to find that she was missing during the argument. Christopher broke the glass on the back door and injured himself. Yet, he maintained that he did not physically harm his wife and that he simply went to sleep. However, his statements contradicted numerous witness accounts of ongoing disputes between the couple. Many people believed that Christopher regularly abused her and showed cruelty in their marriage, despite past claims that nothing happened and that his wife had just run away after their fight. New evidence emerged after a possible murder weapon was found: a metal rod. The investigator visited the widow to discuss a case that had been reopened after 20 years. People close to the suspect reported that he often made strange comments, particularly when he was drinking, which suggested he felt guilty about her death. On February 2, 2012, Christopher Baxter was arrested and charged with murder. He became anxious during the arrest, raised his hands, and requested a lawyer, refusing to confess to the crime. During questioning, he claimed that he had a heated argument with his wife on the night she disappeared. Both he and his wife, Robin, had been drinking after attending a party. After Robin was driven home by Eugene, he accused her of cheating, which made him extremely angry. Eventually, he went to sleep, however. According to a neighbor's testimony and the prosecution's perspective, the situation escalated into a violent confrontation. He allegedly picked up a metal rod from near the wall and struck his wife multiple times in the head and face. Robin ran out into the street, where a neighbor noticed her distress. However, her husband was unable to calm down and pursued her. eventually picking her up in his car instead of taking her home. They drove to the Ohio River, where their argument continued tragically. Robin received a severe blow to the back of her head, which caused her to lose consciousness and die shortly after. To cover up his actions, Christopher disposed of her body by throwing it into the river from a bridge, removing her pants and underwear to make it look like the abuse had occurred. This case has finally come to light. The trial began as a challenging case, facing numerous delays for various reasons. There were also issues with some pieces of evidence. Despite this, the trial proceeded, and throughout the process, Christopher never admitted to any wrongdoing. The prosecution presented testimony from several witnesses who reported hearing frequent screaming coming from the Baxter home, leading them to believe that Christopher frequently assaulted Robin. In contrast, Christopher's lawyer argued that these accusations were fabricated and that the authorities were simply trying to resolve the case by any means. The prosecution argued that the number and severity of Robin's injuries suggested premeditated murder, pointing out that only Christopher had a motive against her. The jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, resulting in Christopher Baxter being sentenced to 55 years in prison. The defense continued to fight and submitted multiple appeals. After 22 years of freedom, the killer was finally sentenced to a long prison term. The reason the police could not prove his guilt from the start may be because Christopher portrayed himself as a grieving widower, making people not suspect him of involvement in the crime. Christopher appealed various aspects of the 1990 sentencing law. Ultimately, his sentence was reduced to 40 years, however. He was released early in August 2020 and has been keen to keep his life out of the spotlight ever since. Hello everyone. Today, we will learn about another case. The case of Zachary Davis. Zachary Everett Davis was 15 years old when he committed a particularly cold-blooded and senseless murder. Just a couple of years later, he gained notoriety on the internet after a chilling interview with Dr. Phil McGraw. In that interview, he details the murder, what he felt, and what was going on in his mind. The Davis family lived in Hendersonville, Tennessee. The family included Chris, the father, Melanie, the mother, and their two sons, Josh and Zachary, who were just a year apart in age. This close age made them more like best friends than typical brothers, as they spent a lot of time together playing and hanging out. Overall, the Davis family appeared to be happy and normal, except for Zachary, the younger son, who was a challenging child. He was quiet, shy, and emotionally distant, often displaying obsessive behaviors due to his sadness. Then, as Zachary grew a bit older, some strange symptoms began to manifest, and it became clear that he was suffering from a mental illness. This situation was a significant challenge for both Zachary and his family, but they persevered and sought help from various specialists. In 2009, Chris Davis, the father of the family, passed away from motor neuron disease, also known as ALS. This degenerative condition affects muscle control, leading to a gradual loss of movement over time. Individuals with ALS often become unable to walk and may need a wheelchair. The disease also impacts speech, making it slurred and difficult to understand, and in some cases, it can completely rob patients of their ability to speak. Witnessing a loved one endure this painful decline is incredibly challenging. Unfortunately, the Davis family underwent this firsthand as they watched Chris decline until his death. This experience deeply affected the entire family, especially Zachary, who was very close to his father. After his father's passing, Zachary's behavior changed significantly. He became withdrawn and fell into depression. His mental health worsened, making daily life a struggle. He was hospitalized multiple times. He was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia and depression stemming from his loss. A psychotherapist was assigned to him, and Zachary attended 4 therapy sessions before he stopped going, since he was only 12 at the time. His mother, Melanie, took him to the appointments. For reasons unknown, She eventually decided to discontinue the therapy sessions and instead began taking him to a doctor. Whether Zachary resisted therapy or his mother was too busy, he ultimately received no support for his mental health issues despite his challenges. Zachary made an effort to lead a normal life. He attended school, but he rarely interacted with anyone there. While he went to class, his classmates found him odd because he never initiated conversations. For instance, if someone smiled at him, he wouldn't smile back. He would simply look away. He only spoke when absolutely necessary, such as when a teacher addressed him or when an important question was asked. When he did talk, his voice was very soft, almost a whisper. As if he were hesitant to join the conversation, Zachary had no friends. Likely because he did not enjoy socializing or meeting new people, his only close companion was his older brother, Josh. They played and spent a lot of time together before their father's death. After Chris's death, Zachary became withdrawn and seemed to prefer that state. His classmates noticed that he wore the same hoodie every day and often kept the hood up when he was outside, which displayed unusual behavior, unlike his brother. Josh, who was active, participated in sports, had many friends, and frequently attended parties. Zachary chose to isolate himself in his bedroom. He showed little interest in going outside or engaging in a lively, varied life. He did enjoy reading and watching movies, especially horror films, which were his favorite genre. He also had a fascination with true crime documentaries and became overly engrossed in real-life criminal cases. Sometimes idolizing the criminals, this interest was unhealthy. While watching crime films, Zachary exhibited no empathy for the victims and instead became captivated by the killers. Viewing them as role models, he kept multiple notebooks because he loved to write and draw. One of these notebooks was always with him and served as a diary where he recorded his feelings and daily experiences. When Zachary turned 14, he told his mother that he had started hearing voices. Specifically, there was one voice he heard every night that caused him so much stress he could hardly sleep. This voice belonged to his deceased father and said many distressing things. Concerned, Melanie took Zachary to a psychiatrist. Unfortunately, his condition only worsened initially. Zachary only heard the voice at night when he was trying to sleep, but eventually it began to occur all the time, and he found himself constantly talking to it over the next few years. Zachary's mental health continued to decline, and he did not receive adequate support, although he had a diagnosis. He did not attend regular therapy sessions and likely wasn't on any medication after the loss of Chris. Melanie tried to balance work and household responsibilities while spending quality time with her sons. She worked hard to create a sense of normalcy in their lives by organizing family activities and planning fun outings. On August 10, 2012, Melanie took her sons to the movies, and they all had a wonderful time. After the movie, they returned home late and went to bed, however. Zachary had different plans for the night. He packed a backpack with notepads, pens, a toothbrush, a change of clothes, a ski mask, gloves, a hammer, and a knife. He then zipped up the backpack and went to the garage to retrieve a heavy sledgehammer that the family kept there. Around 11 p.m., Zachary picked up the sledgehammer and walked to his mother's bedroom. He paused at the door. Looking at his mother, was asleep with the lights off. In that moment, he felt completely clear-headed. He approached her, lifted the sledgehammer, and began to strike her repeatedly with all his strength. He did this with such brute force that her blood splashed all over the room. The force of the blows caved in his mother's skull. Zachary recounted that his mother regained consciousness after the first or second blow, but she couldn't speak. Instead, she started to have convulsions during this time. Her eyes were open, and Zachary glanced into her eyes while he struck her with the sledgehammer, even though his mother was looking at him. She was unaware of her surroundings or what was occurring. Zachary admitted that throughout the violent attack on his mother, he was laughing, describing it as joyful laughter. 15-year-old Zachary brutally killed his mother in just a few minutes, however. He had more planned. His older brother, Josh, who was 16 at the time, was asleep in his bedroom after killing their mother. Zachary went downstairs with a bloody sledgehammer, leaving a trail of blood in the hallway before leaving the weapon in the laundry room. There are conflicting reports about what he did next. Some say he took gasoline, while others claim he grabbed whiskey or another flammable liquid. Zachary then returned to his mother's bedroom and began pouring the liquid everywhere. He also soaked the game room upstairs with the flammable liquid, after setting fires in both rooms. He took a pre-packed backpack and left, allowing the house to burn along with his mother's body and his still-living brother. Zachary's plan went horribly wrong. He wanted the house fire to destroy any evidence of his crime and to eliminate his brother. However, he made a critical error by setting the fires in 2 rooms and then closing the doors. This restricted the fire's spread, causing the smoke alarms to activate immediately. The noise of the alarms woke Josh. He jumped out of bed and rushed to his mother's bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a horrifying sight: his mother lying on the bed, covered in blood. In that moment, Josh realized he couldn't save her. She was already dead. Frantic, he ran out of the house to a neighbor's home and called 911. It's hard to fathom what must have been racing through Josh's mind. Everything unfolded so quickly. He woke to the fire alarm, discovered the blaze, and rushed to help his mother, only to find her lifeless body. The sequence of events unfolded rapidly, demonstrating how effectively the brain processes such situations. Emergency services arrived at the scene and extinguished the fire. Unfortunately, Melanie Davis was declared dead on sight, and the police began questioning Josh about what had happened. He immediately informed them that his younger brother, Zachary, who was gravely ill, was missing. Zachary had not been in the house during the fire, prompting the police to issue a missing persons report for him. This information was dispatched to all local police officers, and search teams quickly began their efforts. Knowing that Zachary could not have wandered far, he was located the following morning. About 10 miles from home, the police concluded that as soon as he left the house, he just kept walking, stopping occasionally to make entries in his notebook. When found, Zachary was covered in blood and was still wearing the same clothes in which he had killed his mother, although he had a change of clothes in his bag. It's unclear why he didn't use them. This aided the search since the police recognized him immediately. They knew he was the suspect and arrested him, taking him to the police station. There, Zachary Davis confessed to murdering his mother and believed his brother had died in the house fire. He intended to kill both his brother and mother, leaving home under the belief that his plan had completely succeeded. During the police interrogation, Zachary was cooperative, providing all the required information and answering every question. However, he showed no signs of guilt or remorse. He appeared cold and indifferent when recounting his actions. He spoke in a way that suggested he felt no emotions whatsoever. When investigators asked Zachary why he committed the act, he stated that he believed his mother deserved to die because she was not a good mother. He felt she had not properly cared for him and his brothers. Zachary said that she made him and his brother do everything around the house, including washing and cooking. He also said that they essentially had to raise themselves, which likely started around the time their father died. Zachary thought it would be futile to communicate his feelings to her. He believed that bringing up his concerns, expressing himself, or attempting to change her behavior would be pointless because he thought she would not listen. As a result, he believed his only solution was to kill her. However, this was not the only reason for the murder. Zachary also experienced distress because he heard the voice of his deceased father every night, which prevented him from sleeping. This voice communicated dreadful things to him. The voice Zachary heard primarily spoke about his mother, Melanie, claiming she was bad and deserved to die. This is what the voice, which Zachary believed to be his father's, conveyed to him, leading him to think that Melanie should die. When the police asked Zachary how long he had been hearing these voices, he said they had been in his head for a long time. Zachary admitted he hadn't planned it for long. He had the idea and organized everything on the same day, carrying it out just a few hours later. He may have even decided to do it before they went to the movies, despite claiming that the idea was spontaneous. Zachary's resentment towards his mother had been building up for quite a while. Zachary explained in his interview with Dr. Phil McGraw that he chose the day of the incident because he was free and saw it as a good opportunity to act. During the interview, Dr. Phil asked Zachary what it sounded like when he struck his mother with a hammer. And in a chilling moment, Zachary smiled and described the sound as a wet, dull thud. He laughed several times throughout the conversation. Dr. Phil remarked that such laughter is often a sign of nervousness rather than malicious enjoyment. Regardless, Zachary's laughter came across as unsettling. He claimed to love his mother. Though his sincerity was questionable, he acknowledged that they were not close and rarely communicated. Yet there was no animosity between them. The case shocking not only to the public, but also to those who knew the Davis family. While many were aware that Zachary struggled with mental illness, no one expected him to commit such an act against his mother. Zachary also mentioned that he never truly argued with his mother. Instead, he preferred to withdraw during conflicts. So why did he label her a bad mother if there was no real tension? According to him, their mother simply stopped being a mother to them, however. His relationship with his older brother Josh was even worse than his relationship with his mother. Although very few knew about this from the outside, they seemed like best friends during his teenage years. Zachary claimed that Josh abused him severely, even while their mother was at home. It's important to note that Josh was never charged or convicted of any crime, and Josh firmly denies these allegations. He defended himself during a hearing when Zachary's claims were brought up in court as a reason for Zachary's desire to harm him. In court, Josh reiterated that these incidents never occurred. No evidence supports these claims, but it would be challenging to find proof, even if they were true. Zachary claims that this incident significantly influenced his decision to kill his mother. He felt anger towards Melanie. Believing she should have protected him, he felt let down by her because she was in the house when Josh harmed him but did nothing to intervene. She didn't even notice. It seemed to Zachary that she didn't care, and he allegedly tried to tell his mother what Josh had done. But she didn't want to hear it. Zachary wrote in his diary that she wouldn't listen to him and that she never believed him. She got angry every time he brought up the subject. She yelled at him, saying he was lying. This was one of the few topics they argued about. As they generally did not have many disagreements or conflicts within the family, Zachary revealed that the violence he experienced deeply affected him. Following the incident, he refrained from bathing for several weeks because the bathroom lacked a lock, and he was afraid his brother might break in while he was vulnerable. This led to him smelling very unpleasantly, which further fueled his anger towards his mother. It is hard to believe that a mother wouldn't notice their child had stopped showering, yet Melanie never mentioned this to Zachary. As a result, Zachary began to harm himself, which was the most severe sign of his illness. He expressed thoughts of wanting to kill his mother with a sledgehammer, wishing for her to die a painful death rather than peacefully in her sleep. He fantasized about starting a fire while Josh was still in the house, so that Josh would wake up in panic as the flames approached him. Wanting him to suffer, however, things didn't unfold as Zachary had envisioned, and Josh survived now. Reflecting on these events, Zachary regrets not having followed through with his plan to ensure his brother was dead before leaving the house. Many believe that Zachary was not mentally fit to stand trial, but he was ultimately deemed competent, and the trial proceeded, although he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He was tried as an adult. Zachary's defense team presented several factors that may have influenced his actions. They highlighted the death of his father, the voices he claimed to hear from his father, the violence inflicted by his brother, and the alleged neglect he suffered from their mother, Melanie. These were presented as reasons for Zachary's behavior. However, a few days into the trial, an unexpected development occurred. When called to testify about his mother's murder, Zachary claimed he did not commit the crime. This was surprising, especially since he had previously confessed to the police and discussed the incident for months. He now stated that he had no knowledge of who killed his mother and later accused his brother, Josh, of the murder, saying he tried to cover for him by taking the blame. No one believed this new story. As the evidence clearly pointed to Zachary as the perpetrator, it was evident to everyone that he was responsible for the crime, and it was well known that Josh was not involved in their mother's murder. On Friday, June 5, 2014, when Zachary was 17 years old, Sumner County Judge D. David Gay sentenced Zachary Davis to life in prison, with a minimum term of 60 years in Tennessee and the possibility of parole after 51 years. When he is eligible for parole, Zachary Davis will be about 68 years old. Whether this murder was a brutal murder or the result of a mental disorder, it is a tragic story of a family destroyed. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Stacy Pannell. Stacy Pannell was born on September 5, 1967, in Ripley, Mississippi, United States. As the first child in her family, she was very close to her parents. During her high school years, Stacy was an active member of the school orchestra. She excelled academically, receiving high grades that earned her scholarships to several colleges. She eventually chose Northeast Mississippi Community College in Boonville, allowing her to stay close to her family and maintain their strong relationship. This decision became even more significant when her father was diagnosed with brain cancer. As a freshman, Stacy continued to participate in the orchestra, practicing and performing regularly. She lived in Murphy Hall, an all-female dormitory on campus, where she shared a room with her roommates, Stephanie Lynn Alexander and Amy Wheeler. Each dormitory room provided students with privacy and was connected to two adjacent rooms through a shared bathroom. On the night of October 8, 1985, Amy Wheeler, one of her roommates, returned to the dorm. When she arrived, she found their room door locked from the inside. She knocked on the door, hoping someone would let her in, but no one answered. Amy then tried to enter through the bathroom, but that door was also locked. Frustrated, she knocked again, waking up a nearby neighbor, Stephanie. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and Stephanie was understandably irritated as she had been asleep. Eventually, Amy managed to enter the room and noticed that Stacy's door was slightly open. When she looked inside, she immediately noticed something unusual. Stacy was lying on the bed with her left leg propped up, while her right leg was hanging down toward the floor. Curious, Amy walked over, adjusted her position, and covered her with a blanket. However, when she touched Stacy's leg to lift it, she panicked because it felt cold and heavy. Looking closer, she noticed a dark stain on the bed. When she realized it was a significant amount of blood, Amy was horrified. Panicking, Amy ran into the hallway, screaming for help. Her screams woke up another student, Belinda Posey, who quickly ran out to see what was happening. Amy told her that Stacy was dead. When the two girls returned to the room shared by Stephanie and Stacy, they discovered that the doors, which had been open earlier, were now locked. Since the doors did not close automatically, it became clear that someone had locked them deliberately. This realization terrified the girls, as they feared that the perpetrator might still be nearby, adding to the tension and fear. To investigate further, the girls used the bathroom passage again. When Amy checked Stacy's room, she confirmed that the door was locked. In a state of panic, they ran back into the hallway and sought help from another student, Edna Snyder, who had also been awakened by the noise. Edna immediately went to the school security guard and asked him to unlock the door with the master key. When the group finally entered Stacy's room, they discovered that something terrible had happened to her. The janitor was horrified to find that Stacy was cold to the touch and appeared to be dead. The police were immediately called to the school. When forensic officers arrived, they discovered that Stacy had suffered severe injuries to her left leg and a head wound that appeared to have been caused by blows from a blunt object. The extent of her injuries indicated the brutality of the attack. Stacy had been a freshman in college for just over a month. During that time, she had made many friends among her classmates and other girls. Police noticed a cane that Stacy used for her orchestra performances lying on the floor near her body. It was wrapped in a towel and there was blood on the handle. Police concluded that someone had beaten Stacy to death with the cane, wrapping the towel around it to avoid leaving fingerprints. Stacy's window was slightly open. Her room, located on the first floor, overlooked a large field. It appeared that the perpetrator had used this window to enter and exit the room, escaping undetected by running across the field instead of through the school grounds. However, this was just a theory that required further evidence. Another theory suggested that the criminal entered through the main door and escaped through the window. Police considered the possibility that the perpetrator could have been Stacy's boyfriend. Since Stacy's valuables and money were untouched, robbery was ruled out, and investigators suspected that the attack may have been motivated by abuse. The police immediately began questioning everyone who was in the dormitory at the time, but no one reported seeing anything unusual. Even the security guard confirmed that no strangers had entered the building. There were no visitors in the evening, and no one stayed overnight with their girlfriends. After curfew, all guests were immediately evicted. However, students did not always obey curfew and often snuck into their rooms. There were several secret passageways that students used, allowing people familiar with the dormitory to easily gain access. This suggested that the perpetrator may have had connections to the dormitory and knowledge of these secret routes. At the time, there were 136 students living in Murphy Hall, which was spread over 3 floors. Police interviewed each girl individually to determine if anyone had noticed anything unusual that evening or during the night, such as screaming or signs of a struggle. However, no one reported hearing anything. This suggested that Stacy may have been asleep when she was attacked. The attack appeared to have happened suddenly, leaving her no time to react. Forensic experts also examined Stacy's room. A key piece of evidence was her performance cane. Surprisingly, the cane had no fingerprints on it, not even Stacy's. The only clue in the room was a small fingerprint found on Stacy's body. However, in 1985, technology was not advanced enough to make a full identification. After some time, the autopsy results revealed a surprising discovery. There were no signs of abuse. This suggested that the perpetrator had deliberately staged the crime scene by removing Stacy's clothes to mislead the police. Armed with this new information, the police began reconstructing the timeline of events on October 7, the day Stacy died. That morning, Stacy attended class and later went to band practice. Afterward, she participated in an intramural softball game. Following the game, she returned to her dorm to study. Around 10 p.m., she went for a walk with some friends from her dorm. Later, a female friend picked her up, and they met with a group that included a boy Stacy had recently started dating. Stacy spent the evening with him, and he eventually drove her back to her dorm. The last confirmed sighting of Stacy was shortly after midnight in the hallway of Murphy Hall, where she was seen returning to her room and going to sleep. The police turned their attention to Stacy's boyfriend and began their investigation by questioning Tommy Osborne, who became their first suspect. Tommy was cooperative and appeared genuinely shocked by the news of Stacy's death. He explained that they had only recently started dating and confirmed that he had dropped her off at her dorm after spending the evening together. When the police requested to search his room, Tommy agreed without hesitation. However, the search yielded no evidence implicating him. To eliminate any remaining doubts, Tommy agreed to take a lie detector test, which he passed without incident. Although he was officially cleared as a suspect, Tommy was unable to provide any significant leads for the investigation. His relationship with Stacy was new, and he had no knowledge of her having any enemies. Unfortunately, he could not offer any useful information to advance the case. Stacy's best friend, however, provided a potential clue. She mentioned Stacy's ex-boyfriend, who lived in her hometown and had been in a serious relationship with her. The two were even engaged and had plans to marry. However, Stacy ended the relationship on her own, deciding to move into a dorm to focus on her studies. Her ex-boyfriend was strongly opposed to the breakup and had complained to several friends about Stacy's decision. His behavior became obsessive as he began stalking her by showing up uninvited and arranging surprise encounters. He persistently tried to convince her to reconcile and resume their relationship. Despite his efforts, Stacy was determined to end the relationship. She wanted to focus on her studies without distractions from her ex-boyfriend. During her first semester, Stacy frequently confided in her friends about the increasing pressure from him. It was clear he could not accept her decision to break up. He even aggressively demanded the return of her engagement ring, claiming he wanted to pawn it for money. While Stacy found his obsession annoying, she was not afraid of him. Her ex-boyfriend quickly became the police's prime suspect. When questioned, he adamantly denied any involvement in Stacy's murder. He admitted that he had struggled to accept their breakup and the end of their engagement, but claimed that he had eventually come to terms with it. He continued to insist on his innocence and even provided the police with an alibi. He was at home during the time of Stacy's murder and went to bed early. His mother, who worked at the hospital from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., corroborated his account. She stated that when she returned home, she checked on her son and found him asleep. However, the police considered this alibi unreliable. They believed his mother might have been covering for him, and the university was only about a 30-minute drive away. After his mother checked on him and went to bed, he could have left the house undetected, committed the crime, and returned. Despite this suspicion, there was no solid evidence to charge him. Stacy's ex-boyfriend agreed to take a lie detector test, but unlike Tommy's results, his results were inconclusive. Therefore, he remained a suspect. At the time, the investigation created considerable pressure on the school community. In the 6 months following Stacy's death, police interviewed numerous students at the school, but the case made no significant progress. There was a growing risk that Stacy's murder would remain unsolved for years. Meanwhile, students were gripped by fear, worried about the possibility of more attacks. In response, the school administration tightened security and implemented stricter rules. Students were no longer allowed to leave campus after curfew. Despite these measures, fear persisted, and many remained extremely anxious. A year after Stacy's death, one of the police officers investigating her case attended a workshop to improve his skills. During the workshop, an expert in interrogation techniques introduced a new method of analyzing body language and movements to determine whether a suspect was lying. The seminar was led by Steve Rhodes, a veteran police officer from the Chicago suburbs who had served as a police chief for many years. He was known for his ability to quickly determine whether someone was telling the truth or lying. Steve originally developed this technique to catch illegal drug dealers, and it proved to be extremely effective. He successfully extracted a confession from a notorious crime boss, along with the extradition of 7 key members of the gangs involved in smuggling. After this success, he documented his methods and introduced the new interrogation technique to his colleagues. His expertise earned him recognition, and he began holding seminars on the subject. After one of these seminars, Steve was invited to Mississippi to assist in solving Stacy's murder. He agreed to help and requested to speak with everyone who had been interviewed during the investigation. He wanted to hear directly from everyone who knew Stacy to piece together what had happened. First, Steve interviewed Amy Wheeler, the person who discovered Stacy's body. He believed Amy was telling the truth. She provided detailed information, and her facial expressions and body language showed genuine fear, which convinced Steve of her honesty. Next, Steve interviewed Stephanie, Stacy's roommate. Stephanie recounted how she spent October 7th and remained truthful until she spoke about the evening. However, when Stephanie described going back to school before going to bed, Steve noticed inconsistencies in her story. He let her finish and then left the interrogation room. Outside, he informed the police officers handling the case that Stephanie was the one who had killed Stacy. At first, no one believed Steve. The police had never even considered Stephanie a possible suspect. However, Steve was convinced that she was the killer, which explained why Stacy's bedroom door was suddenly closed. The shocking truth was that the killer was not only new to the school, but also lived there and never left after the murder. What scared Steve the most was that the criminal was a girl. In his mind, the culprit was Stephanie. Determined, Steve returned to the interrogation room to confront Stephanie. After nearly 2 hours of continuous questioning, Stephanie glared at him angrily and accused him of being a psychic. Without hesitation, Steve agreed and told her that he could read her mind. Stephanie eventually admitted to Steve that she was the one who killed Stacy. She then recounted what had happened the night Stacy came home. The two had argued about a boy they both liked, Tommy. The argument escalated, and Stephanie lost control. She grabbed a stick from the corner of the room and hit Stacy in the head. Stacy immediately fell to the floor, unconscious. But Stephanie could not stop. She continued to attack until Stacy stopped breathing. Stephanie carefully removed any traces of evidence and destroyed her fingerprints at the crime scene. She also moved Stacy's body and deliberately altered the scene to make it appear as though it was a case of abuse in an effort to mislead the investigation. Stephanie was confident she could get away with it. Had it not been for the intervention of Steve, an experienced police officer, the case might still have been unsolved. A few days after her confession was recorded, Stephanie discovered that Steve was not a psychic. Realizing that she had fallen into a police trap, she attempted to retract her confession during her preliminary hearing. Initially, she claimed she had confessed while under hypnosis. When this explanation failed, she changed her story and alleged that Steve had threatened her. She insisted that she had been coerced into signing the confession through hypnosis. While she was awaiting trial in prison, Stephanie wrote a letter to Randy Price, a boy she had been dating for about a week. Although she always maintained her innocence in public, in this letter, she confessed to murder. The letter described the events of October 7, 1985. According to Stephanie, she had been doing her homework and planned to rest before class. Around 10 p.m., she took 3 pills to ease the pain from an infection and then fell asleep. However, she woke up at 12:30 a.m. when Stacy and several other girls returned home. Stephanie claimed that Stacy was drunk and that several other students had helped her get to bed to ensure she wouldn't end up sleeping on the streets. Stacy, the center of the commotion, was loud and boastful about her new boyfriend, Tommy, whom she had just started dating. This upset Stephanie, who also had feelings for him. Frustrated, but trying to keep her cool, Stephanie walked out and asked everyone to be quiet because she had difficult classes the next day and needed to rest. After her request, the group quickly dispersed. Stephanie tried to sleep again but couldn't. Feeling restless, she decided to go to Stacy's room to apologize for losing her temper, being rude, and for what she had said. Stephanie admitted she had been jealous of Stacy and wanted to learn more about her relationship with Tommy. She even started sharing her own story, hoping Stacy might reconsider her relationship with Tommy. But Stacy suddenly slapped her, which led to an argument and eventually a fight between the two girls. In the letter, Stephanie claimed that Stacy was so aggressive she feared for her own life. At one point, she said Stacy was holding a stick and advancing toward her. Realizing the danger, Stephanie instinctively grabbed the stick first to defend herself from the attack. Based on the contents of the letter, the incident was deemed an act of self-defense. However, it was later revealed that her defense team had urged her to write the letter. The attorneys believed that presenting the incident as self-defense would reduce her culpability and lead to a lighter sentence. The approach itself was deliberate, as both parties were aware that letters and calls from prison were monitored. The letter was crafted as a subtle way to suggest to the prosecutor that the sentence should be reduced. The carefully worded statement, likely composed by the defense team, depicted Stacy as being drunk and out of control during the incident. The trial was contentious and lasted for a month. In the end, the prosecution failed to provide sufficient evidence to prove intent. Stephanie Lynn Alexander was convicted of manslaughter, determined to have acted in a state of rage. She received a 20-year prison sentence, but was released early in August 2001. After her release, Stephanie returned to Mississippi and started a new life. She even opened a small business. To this day, Stephanie maintains her innocence, claiming that she was coerced by the authorities into confessing.